While the lawyers mocked the ex-cop with no family, his dog walked into the courtroom with something in its mouth, and suddenly no one dared to laugh. The walls of Blackwood Correctional Facility seemed to breathe with stories of desperation, secrets, and broken dreams. On most days, the penitentiary was a place of gray uniformity, where hope faded into monotony. But tonight, it vibrated with a strange undercurrent, as if the wind itself whispered of something imminent. In Block C, a guard stepped out of the control room and glanced down the corridor. Rows of heavy steel doors lined both sides, each bolted shut. If anyone dared approach, he would sense a weight in the air, an invisible tension coiled tight. At the far end of that corridor, behind bars scarred by previous inmates, sat a man whose very name evoked both reverence and wariness among the staff. Garrett Rayner, once a decorated police detective, now waiting for an execution date that had arrived more swiftly than he had ever anticipated. His hands, calloused from years wielding a service weapon, rested calmly on his lap. He had learned to quell restless thoughts, though a turmoil lingered beneath the surface. A single dangling light flickered overhead, illuminating lines on his face that spoke of battles fought and nightmares endured. Ever since the guilty verdict, everyone referred to him as the cop-turned-murderer. The newspapers had had a field day printing sensational headlines about how he allegedly crossed the line. Yet the truth was far more complicated. Garrett claimed he had been framed. He insisted he had pursued a lead involving corruption within the force, one that led him straight into a trap. But no one believed him, or no one dared. The day the gavel struck, sealing his fate, he felt his entire world collapse into darkness. "Rayner." A guard's voice broke the silence. "Come with me." The ex-cop stood. Shackles clanked around his ankles and wrists, reminding him that he no longer roamed free. He felt the usual prickle of dread and forced himself to maintain a stoic mask. Step by step, he followed the guard down a corridor lit by harsh fluorescent lights. The hush was broken only by the hum of electricity and the distant echo of another prisoner's cough. Garrett's heart pounded, uncertain whether this was a routine movement or the final escort to his execution chamber. They passed through a set of reinforced doors until they reached a small room with a single table and 2 chairs. No windows. Inside, an older, bearded lawyer waited with a folder of documents. A flicker of hope stirred in Garrett's chest. Perhaps a last-minute appeal or a hidden piece of evidence. The lawyer's voice was weary. "Garrett, this is a hearing about your request for special visitation. It's highly unusual for a death row inmate to receive any live animal on the premises, but we have circumstances." Garrett nodded, bracing himself. "And the warden?" "Reluctant," sighed the lawyer. "But he agreed to one final request. Under strict supervision, you'll be allowed to see your dog." A strange rush of emotion flooded Garrett, memories of his canine partner. Only this was not the standard police dog. After resigning from the detective unit, he had kept a personal service dog named Axel. That dog had once been his partner in every sense, tracking suspects by day and easing his nightmares at night. Now that Garrett's life was measured in days, Axel was the one living soul he desperately wanted to see. "Tomorrow morning," the lawyer concluded. "The warden gave us a half hour." Garrett managed a grateful nod. He was not sure if he deserved it. After all, he had been labeled a criminal by the system he once served. And yet, in the back of his mind, he remained convinced that the real criminals were still out there, pulling strings, forging evidence, ensuring he took the fall. When the guard reshackled him and led him back to his cell, he closed his eyes, imagining Axel's alert ears and unwavering loyalty. Night descended, and Blackwood Correctional Facility remained trapped under a dome of foreboding silence. Garrett lay on his cot, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Strangely, he felt calmer. Perhaps the thought of Axel gave him a reason to hold on to some shard of peace, even as the ticking clock edged him closer to the day they would strap him to a gurney. Was it possible that seeing his dog might also reveal something new? Deep down, a small voice whispered, "Maybe." Morning broke in jagged beams through the narrow slit of a window near the ceiling of his cell. Hours later, the heavy door swung open, accompanied by the guard from the previous evening. "Time for your visit," he said curtly. Garrett followed, each clank of his chains echoing in the hallway. At the visitation room, a swirl of conflicting emotions churned in his gut. The door opened, and there stood Axel. His fur was mostly black, with a white streak across his chest. The dog's eyes brightened the moment Garrett stepped in, and an excited whine filled the otherwise somber space. "Easy, boy," Garrett murmured, kneeling to stroke the thick fur on Axel's neck. The dog pressed closer, tail wagging in a blur, as if determined to say all the words only dogs could speak with pure devotion. Behind them, the guard looked on, arms crossed, face unreadable. The lawyer watched from the other side of the glass partition, prepared to intervene if something went awry. For long minutes, Garrett forgot about the prison, forgot about the death sentence. He was a man reunited with his truest friend. Then, a ripple in the air. Axel stiffened, turning his head sharply toward the corner of the room. The dog's sudden alert stance set Garrett's instincts tingling. In his days on the force, he had learned to trust Axel's signals. Someone was near. At first, Garrett assumed it was just another guard or an administrative staff member passing outside, but the lawyer's gaze flicked in that same direction, perplexed. Suddenly, the doorknob rattled. The entry door opened, revealing the warden himself, accompanied by two men in expensive suits. Their posture spoke of authority and cunning. Garrett's breath caught, noticing a departmental insignia on their lapels. Could they be from Internal Affairs or some higher agency? "Raynor," said the warden, his voice a forced calm. "We have visitors with new questions about your case." Axel's ears flattened slightly. An uneasy hush fell. One of the men, tall and narrow-faced, scanned Garrett with a cool eye. "We've come to finalize certain details regarding your upcoming transfer," he said vaguely. "Additional reviews." There was no mention of a possible reprieve or a new trial, just polite bureaucratic language dancing around unknown decisions. Garrett forced his voice not to tremble. "Transfer? I'm on death row. Where do you plan to transfer me?" The man smiled without warmth. "Sometimes an inmate is relocated for high security reasons. That's all you need to know, Raynor." A spark of suspicion flared within Garrett. This was not standard procedure. "And if I refuse?" The warden stepped forward, gaze shifting away. "You can't refuse, son. The process is already in motion." Axel let out a low growl, so soft it was almost imperceptible, but Garrett felt the resonance run through his own frame. Something was off. He locked eyes with his dog, wishing they could communicate the way they once did out in the field. Silent signals, mutual trust. The tension thickened as the men turned to leave. "We'll be seeing you soon, Raynor. Expect instructions." Then they were gone, leaving a disconcerting emptiness in their wake. Garrett glanced at the lawyer, who shrugged helplessly. As for the guard, his face remained neutral, though Garrett sensed the man was also troubled. Slowly, the lawyer beckoned him back to the table. "Let me see what I can find out," he whispered. "This is highly irregular." Axel nuzzled Garrett's hand in a comforting gesture, but the ex-cop's heart pounded. The idea of a covert transfer felt like a death knell beyond the official execution, a final silencing to keep a larger truth hidden. The half-hour ticked away too fast, and soon the guard announced that visitation time had ended. As they separated man from dog, Garrett saw the confusion and concern in Axel's posture. He fought the urge to beg for a few more seconds, but the guard's grip was firm. A moment later, the door slammed shut behind him, and the clang echoed down corridors that smelled of fear and antiseptic. Back in his cell, Garrett tried to quell the dread gnawing at him. Transferring an inmate so close to execution was bizarre. He closed his eyes, recalling each detail. Those suits, the departmental insignia, the warden's evasive stance. They were orchestrating something bigger, something that likely spelled doom for any last chance Garrett had to prove his innocence. That night, no one slept soundly at Blackwood Correctional Facility. Thunder rumbled in the distance, adding a foreboding note. When dawn broke, a transport van waited in the penitentiary's rear lot. Under heavy guard, Garrett was ushered through the gloom, shackles clinking against wet asphalt. He caught only a glimpse of sunrise filtered by barbed wire fencing. Inside the van, two silent officers sat across from him, rifles propped by their knees. "Mind telling me where we're going?" Garrett asked, his voice echoing in the claustrophobic interior. Neither officer responded. The engine roared to life and the van lurched forward. As they exited the prison grounds, Garrett felt a twisted sense of finality. He might never return. Could this be some extra-legal arrangement, a contract to get rid of him quietly? He couldn't shake the notion that whoever had framed him for murder was pulling these strings. Hours passed. The roads they traveled shifted from highway to remote back streets, deeper into wilderness. Eventually, the vehicle turned onto a dirt path flanked by towering pine trees. No signs, no landmarks, only tall, silent timber. The driver killed the headlights. They proceeded in near darkness, the beams replaced by faint rays of morning light penetrating the canopy. Something about this was sinister and clandestine. The van stopped abruptly in a clearing. An old structure loomed ahead, rusted chain-link fences, cinder-block walls, all of it reeking of abandonment. The officers gestured for Garrett to step out. He complied, shielding his eyes from the glare. Before he could speak, a muffled bark reached his ears. Was that Axel? His heart stuttered. Why would Axel be brought to such a place? One of the officers, apparently noticing Garrett's reaction, snapped, "Keep moving." They led him inside the crumbling facility. Corridors stank of mildew, and the overhead lights flickered. In a deserted room lined with broken chairs, he saw Axel confined behind a heavy metal gate. The dog whined in recognition, tail thumping. "What are you doing with him?" Garrett demanded, anger surging. He took a step forward, only to have a rifle butt block his path. "Orders," muttered the second officer. "We hold you both here for disposal." The word hissed out with casual brutality. Garrett's blood turned to ice. Disposal? So they planned a silent execution, away from official eyes. The illusions of a lawful sentence had crumbled. This was murder under the guise of protocol. The officer who spoke shifted awkwardly as if he disliked his own words, but he took no further action to help. Axel barked sharply, straining against the gate, anxious to reunite with Garrett. In that moment, the ex-cop felt an old instinct awaken, the fierce drive to protect, survive, expose the truth. He recognized that look in his dog's eyes. It was the same from countless nights patrolling dark alleys, tracking criminals with unwavering focus. If they were going down, they would go down fighting. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling broken windows. The two officers stepped aside to confer in whispers, leaving Garrett near Axel. The dog's muzzle pressed through the gaps of the gate. Garrett gently placed his hand on the rough fur. Time was short. Somehow, he had to find a way out. He glanced around at the decaying walls, the shadows, the corner where a piece of rebar protruded from the floor. A plan formed, reckless yet urgent. Garrett locked eyes with Axel, silently communicating readiness. The dog's posture tensed with that old, almost telepathic bond. Then Garrett moved, hurling himself toward the rebar, managing to hook the chain around it, yanking down. The snap of metal echoed as the chain broke free from the manacle. One of the officers rushed forward, but Axel lunged at the gate, snarling, distracting him just enough. Garrett ripped the broken chain link from the old fence, forcing the lock on Axel's enclosure. The dog burst out, teeth bared. The men shouted in alarm, brandishing weapons. Adrenaline fueled Garrett's next move. He tackled the first officer, slamming him against the rusted fence. Axel sprang at the second, clamping onto the man's forearm before he could raise the rifle. A strangled yell rang out. In seconds, both officers were disarmed and pinned, but not fatally hurt. Garrett and Axel needed to move fast. Panting, Garrett glanced at the exit. It was blocked by a heavy door. Another bark sounded from the outside corridor, more footsteps, reinforcements. The ex-cop had no illusions. If they were caught here, they'd be killed. No official record needed. But as panic threatened to take hold, Axel let out a low whine, sniffing the air as though detecting an alternate route. With the second officer still reeling, Garrett seized a keyring from his belt. Then he followed his dog down the dark hallway, deeper into the crumbling facility, searching for a path to freedom. In the distance, men's voices rose, orders barked, boots clattered. The hunt had begun. In the corridor beyond the battered door, the smell of damp and rust thickened with every step. Garrett held Axel's collar loosely, letting the dog move ahead. The building felt endless in its decay, corridors twisting beneath flickering bulbs, walls patched with water stains. Each corner promised either a dead end or a clash with armed men. He focused on the dog's keen senses. Years ago, on stakeouts under moonlight, Garrett had learned to trust the way Axel's ears would prick or swivel, guiding them toward criminals' hideouts. Now, in this forlorn place, those instincts might be their only salvation. They reached a room filled with toppled filing cabinets, their drawers emptied long ago, scraps of paper scattered like dead leaves. Axel halted, sniffing frantically at a fallen metal door half wedged against a corridor wall. A muffled noise echoed from somewhere beyond, a clank of metal, the shuffle of boots on concrete. Garrett crouched, pressing his ear close to the ground, picking up vibrations. Someone was searching, calling out hushed commands. The sense of being outnumbered drummed against his confidence. He spotted a narrow side passage behind an overturned locker. Tugging at Axel's leash, he maneuvered them through. The hallway beyond was barely lit, as though the overhead tubes had given up decades ago. The air stank of mold. Footsteps receded in the main corridor, but any relief was fleeting. Sooner or later, more guards would come. Garrett paused to tear a strip of cloth from his prison uniform, binding the raw wrist where he'd wrenched the chain free. The pain sharpened his instincts, reminding him that a mistake here meant not just death, but a silent erasure of everything he once stood for. A door loomed at the end of the side passage, its broken sign reading "Records." Inside, desks were overturned, dust thick upon them. In the gloom, something metallic glinted. He crouched to pick it up, a tarnished police badge, scratched so thoroughly that the name was illegible. His jaw clenched at the irony. Once, a badge meant honor. Now it was just a reminder of how easily illusions could be shattered. Axel's ears shot up at a distant shout. The dog's body stiffened, facing the door. A flashlight beam danced outside, illuminating dust motes in the crack beneath the doorway. Garrett pressed himself to the wall, holding Axel close. He felt the dog's heartbeat pounding fast. The footsteps paused outside. Someone rattled the handle. Garrett's breath caught, every muscle tight. Then a voice cursed quietly and the steps moved away. He exhaled, relief tinged with dread. The building seemed to be a labyrinth patrolled by men who wanted him dead, and for reasons that still evaded him, they also considered Axel a target. He remembered how the two silent officers had spoken. Disposal. That single word hammered in his head. No official record, no final statement, just vanishing. If he hadn't broken free, it would have all happened quietly. The weight of betrayal churned in his gut. Someone with deep power wanted him gone, and that meant his old case was bigger than a simple frame job. Despite the fear crawling up his spine, the old detective's spark ignited. He needed to survive long enough to learn who was orchestrating this. A crack of thunder sounded outside, as if the sky itself disapproved of the night's looming violence. Garrett tested the door leading away from records and found it unlocked. Gently, he pressed it open, stepping into yet another corridor. Ahead, something glowed, pale sunlight filtering through a collapsed portion of wall. Axel pulled forward, nose high, tail quivering with cautious excitement. The idea of reaching the outside world was like tasting freedom. Garrett advanced, making sure each step was silent on the damp concrete. Then came voices, closer now. He ducked behind a large steel cabinet. Two figures appeared near the broken wall, brandishing rifles. Through the wide crack behind them, he glimpsed a possible exit onto a weedy lot. But the men blocked the opening, scanning the interior with practiced vigilance. Axel pressed against Garrett's leg. No growl, only tension in every muscle. Silently, Garrett weighed his options. If he tried to rush them, he'd be shot on sight. But doubling back meant heading deeper into the building, risking capture anyway. Then his eyes landed on an odd contraption leaning near the break in the wall, a twisted metal ladder, possibly left from some structural repair. It climbed halfway to a second-level walkway. If he and Axel could circle around from above. He nudged Axel backward, slinking along the corridor's edge. He passed door after door, some locked, others wrenched from their hinges. Every so often a random drip of water fell from overhead, echoing in the hush. Eventually they found a metal stairway going up. The steps groaned underfoot, but he climbed steadily, hand on the rail, breath tight in his lungs. At the top, they emerged onto a catwalk lined by dusty windows. From there, faint morning light revealed a labyrinth of corridors below. The building was bigger than he'd guessed. Perhaps it was once a facility used for training or storage. Now it appeared more like a tomb. An unexpected clang of metal jolted him. Below, reinforcements arrived. He glimpsed at least 3 men stepping in, one wearing plain clothes and the other 2 in matching jackets, something official or paramilitary perhaps. The plainclothes man barked orders. Garrett recognized the voice from the prison yard. It was the same man who had threatened him at Blackwood. That hammered home the reality that these weren't random contract killers. They might be part of a covert operation linked to his old police department's darkest corners. Suddenly the man turned, scanning overhead. Garrett ducked, pulling Axel close. "It's only a matter of time before we flush him out," the man said, voice echoing. "He's wounded. The dog, too." A sneer sharpened his tone. "They won't get far." Garrett's thoughts whirled. Axel was not badly injured, but the dog's limp from the earlier scuffle was noticeable, and Garrett's own wrist felt like fire. They were at a disadvantage, trapped in a fortress of rotting concrete. And yet, if there was a single chance, it might lie in the dog's uncanny detection skills. Axel had once found hidden compartments in suspects' homes, latched onto hidden stashes of evidence. If there was an exit or a passage these men didn't know, Axel might sense it. A sliver of memory surfaced, a line from the prison's rumor mill that Blackwood had been built near the ruins of an old training academy. Could this be that same complex, or part of it? Maybe, just maybe, there was an old sewer or a neglected passage that emerged beyond the main fence. That kind of route was common in older, sprawling facilities. Edging along the catwalk, he spotted a door above the collapsed wall. If he could cross, they might drop down outside unnoticed. He motioned for Axel, who followed faithfully despite the tension. The dog's nails clicked softly on the rusty metal floor. Garrett pressed a hand to the door. It squeaked but opened. Inside was a small utility chamber with holes in the ceiling where daylight trickled through. Broken bits of scaffolding lay scattered. A stench of bat droppings stung his nostrils. A sudden wave of footsteps on the catwalk made him freeze. The men below must have split up, some heading upstairs. They were quick. He closed the door, scanning for a way out. The chamber had no other exit, only that partial hole near the ceiling. But it was too high for Garrett to reach on his own. He rummaged through the debris, finding a wooden plank and some leftover bars. With hurried whispers, he improvised a makeshift ladder. Axel waited, ears perked, whining softly, as if sensing time was running short. Metal banged outside, followed by a man's voice. "Check that room." A flashlight beam glowed under the door. Garrett tensed, urging Axel forward. The dog scrambled onto the plank, powerful hind legs pushing upward. Garrett followed, ignoring the searing pain in his arm. He managed to wedge his shoulders through the ragged opening, pulling himself up onto what felt like the rooftop of the building. A harsh breeze slapped him. Behind, the door below burst open. He flattened against the roof, reaching down for Axel, who jumped, paws scraping the roof's edge. Garrett grasped the dog's harness and hauled him up just as a cluster of men spilled into the chamber. Flashlight beams waved wildly, illuminating dust motes through that narrow hole in the ceiling. Heart-hammering, Garrett inched away, keeping low to avoid being silhouetted. The roof was cracked asphalt, patches of tar, and a jagged perimeter where parts of the structure had caved in. It sloped gently downward on the far side. Garrett crawled, scanning the surroundings. About 30 yards away, a barbed wire fence enclosed the clearing. Beyond that lay trees and a dirt road. Could they drop off the roof and dash for the woods? He heard more shouting from below. They must have realized he was on top. A bullet whizzed past, biting into concrete. He ducked, coaxing Axel to stay low. The men had likely come outside, firing from the ground or from a window. Time shrank to a pinpoint. If they didn't move, they'd be cornered. No negotiations, no mercy, just disposal. He measured the drop from the roof's edge, maybe 10 or 12 feet. Painful but survivable. He swung his legs over, tested the rusted gutter. It groaned ominously, but it might hold just long enough. "Come on, boy," he hissed to Axel. Gently, he lowered the dog first, letting Axel brace his back paws on the cinder block wall. Then Garrett released, landing in a jarring crouch. A bolt of pain lanced through his wrist. Axel stumbled, but kept upright. Cries erupted behind them. He glimpsed at least 2 men racing around the building's corner. They raised rifles. Garrett and Axel sprinted toward the fence. Bullets clattered off rubble. One hissed overhead, slicing into an abandoned water tank. A gush of rancid fluid sprayed. Garrett ducked, pressing forward as adrenaline propelled him. At the fence, razor wire crowned the top. He scanned desperately for a gate. Spotting a heavy chain and padlock around a metal gate, he cursed. The padlock was massive. They had seconds before the gunman closed in. Then he recalled the key ring snatched from the guard. Fumbling, he yanked it from his pocket, trying each key in frantic succession. On the 3rd attempt, the lock clicked open. Relief flared, shots ricocheted off the fence, sparks flying. Garrett flung open the gate and both man and dog plunged into the surrounding brush. Branches whipped their faces. Axel let out a strained pant, still favoring his injured leg, but he kept going, refusing to stop. The shouts at their backs faded as they pressed deeper into the wilderness. Overhead, the sun rose higher, streaking the sky with pale gold. A quiet, uneasy calm settled among the towering pines, as if the forest itself offered them sanctuary. Garrett finally paused, chest heaving, letting Axel rest. He listened for pursuit, but heard only rustling leaves and a distant crow's call. Gently, he stroked Axel's head. "Good boy, he whispered. "We're not safe yet, but we're free for now." He replayed the events of the past day in his mind. There had been no official mention of this place, no explanation for those armed men. It confirmed one thing: someone high up wanted him out of the picture. The dog's presence suggested they also knew how crucial Axel was, maybe as living evidence. Had Axel witnessed something or carried some hidden clue? In the old days, Garrett once uncovered how certain canine units got microchips storing special data. The notion seemed far-fetched, but now almost nothing felt impossible. He crouched beside Axel, checking the dog's limp. He found a small gash near the thigh, possibly from the scuffle or from climbing through that hole. It needed tending. Far from any sign of civilization, with no supplies, Garrett felt the weight of their predicament. They were fugitives in the eyes of the law, easy targets for those who wanted them gone. But retreating to safety was not an option. If he wanted any chance of clearing his name, he had to figure out who orchestrated his frame-up and why. As he mulled over next steps, Axel suddenly froze, lifting his muzzle. The dog's ears tilted forward. That old familiar sign. Someone was nearby. Garrett's pulse quickened. He peered through the pines, seeing a flicker of movement. A silhouette crossed into a patch of sunlight not far off, then vanished behind a tree. Friend or foe? Quietly, Garrett sank behind a fallen trunk, motioning Axel to stay. The dog didn't growl, just locked his gaze on that cluster of trees. A twig snapped. Whoever it was, they were approaching cautiously. Garrett readied himself, every nerve taut. Could it be one of the armed men tracking them through the forest? Then a voice, trembling but resolute, broke the hush. Rayner, Garrett Rayner. He startled, not expecting to hear his own name. A woman stepped forward, hands lifted in a gesture of peace. She wore civilian clothes, jeans and a jacket, her hair pulled into a messy bun. Her face was etched with concern but not hostility. He blinked. That face seemed vaguely familiar, maybe from a time before prison. "I'm with your lawyer's office," she said softly. "They sent me to find you." His mind spun with questions. How had she tracked them here? And why? Axel let out a low whine, uncertain. Garrett, still on guard, studied her carefully. No sign of a weapon. She was alone. Her gaze flicked to Axel, then back to Garrett. "We don't have much time," she breathed. "If you want to live long enough to prove your innocence, you need to come with me." Garrett's pulse pounded with a mixture of hope and suspicion. Could this be a trap? Yet what choice did he have? His intuition, honed over years on the force, told him something about her tone was genuine. He glanced at Axel, reading trust in the dog's posture. The forest was no refuge if that group of gunmen decided to comb the area. Perhaps going with this stranger was the only path forward. "All right," he said at last, "but first I need answers." She nodded, exhaling relief. "I'll explain everything on the way. Let's move." They followed her into the depths of the pines. Far behind them, distant shouts hinted that the men from the abandoned facility were fanning out. The woman led them along a faint trail, her pace brisk but careful. Axel limped, yet refused to fall behind. Every few minutes she glanced over her shoulder as if fearing an ambush. Garrett remained silent, adrenaline buzzing under his skin. He didn't know what awaited him, or whether they could truly outrun those who wanted him dead. But the presence of a stranger offering help was more than he'd had yesterday, and as the early sun kissed the canopy overhead, he felt a tiny spark of possibility ignite. He had escaped death's clutches once. With Axel at his side, perhaps he could outmaneuver the shadows closing in. And maybe, just maybe, the truth that haunted him about his old case, his sudden fall from grace, would finally surface. He glanced down at his dog, remembering the curious phrase, "until his dog reveals the unexpected." It had echoed in his mind since the day everything fell apart. Could it be that Axel harbored a secret that would topple a far-reaching conspiracy? In the hush of the forest, Garrett promised himself this: he would find out. And if that secret could save them both, he'd risk everything to uncover it. They moved in silence through the tall pines, weaving between low underbrush and fallen logs. A single file line formed without words. The stranger led, Garrett in the middle, and Axel trailing close, his limp apparent but not slowing him too much. Shafts of sunlight speared the forest floor, creating patterns that shifted with every step. Even with the morning's gentle warmth, anxiety clung to them like a damp chill. The echo of gunshots had faded, but Garrett knew better than to think they were safe. After half a mile, the woman finally paused in a small clearing near a narrow creek. She turned and made eye contact with Garrett for the first time since they'd left the abandoned facility behind. "Let's try to clean his wound," she said, gesturing to Axel. "I have a basic first aid kit. I'm Jade, by the way. Jade Morales." Garrett nodded, not yet ready to offer the trust a name exchange normally implied. He watched as Jade knelt, rummaging through a compact satchel slung over her shoulder. Axel inspected the bag with weary curiosity, nose twitching. Jade retrieved gauze, antiseptic wipes, and a small bottle of water. Without speaking further, she began to clean the cut on the dog's hind leg. Axel flinched, but a soft murmur from Garrett helped calm him. As Jade worked, Garrett took in her appearance. She seemed in her early 30s, athletic build, dark hair streaked by the sun. A swirl of questions rattled in his mind. Why had his lawyer's office sent someone like her? Was she ex-military, an investigator, or simply a risk-taker drawn to dangerous assignments? He cleared his throat. "You mentioned you had answers." Jade nodded as she dabbed antiseptic on the wound. Axel let out a whine but stayed still. "A lot has happened since you were transferred to death row," she said quietly. "Your lawyer suspected there might be deeper corruption. But it wasn't until certain files went missing and reappeared that we realized you might have been framed by people in high places." Garrett tensed at the confirmation of his worst fears. "So you know who set me up?" Her eyes flicked up to meet his. "Not exactly. But I've been digging into your old precinct, the closed-door cases, the hush-hush deals. There's something about your last investigation that set off alarm bells in the chain of command. A few months ago, I intercepted cryptic references to an operation called Nightchapel. Could be a code name for a smuggling ring or hush money pipeline. I'm still not sure." The mention of his final case sent chills through Garrett. He'd been on the verge of uncovering a major ring of police corruption that bled into organized crime networks. Then, almost overnight, he was charged with a homicide he swore he didn't commit. "They pinned a murder on me," he whispered, voice trembling with old rage. "I never even met the victim. An informant, supposedly. The evidence was all faked, but no one wanted to hear the truth." Jade nodded grimly. "Whoever orchestrated this has resources. Not just inside the force, higher. Maybe politicians, maybe private security contractors. Your lawyer believes they wanted you quietly executed before you could talk." A knot of fury and desperation tightened in Garrett's chest. The last few hours, fleeing from that covert facility, had already made it clear someone powerful wanted him dead. But hearing it from Jade sealed the gravity of the conspiracy. He glanced down at Axel, remembering the dog's instincts back in the day. "Where does my dog fit into this?" he asked. "He's not just a pet. He was my partner. A specialized K9 I bought with my own money after I left the detective unit. Are they worried he knows something? That sounds crazy." Jade exhaled, leaning back on her heels, gauze still in hand. "There's a theory that Axel might have been around certain crucial sites, enough to pick up forensic evidence or signals. Sometimes dogs are used to track illegal contraband or hidden records. If Axel went on private sweeps with you, even off the books, Maybe they think he holds the key to revealing the bigger scheme. And because they can't be sure what you know or what you've uncovered, they want both of you gone. A jolt of realization coursed through Garrett. In those weeks before his arrest, he'd indeed taken Axel to abandoned warehouses, run-down garages, following tips about an underground trafficking operation that allegedly had ties to law enforcement. The dog had alerted on certain chemicals, hidden compartments. At the time, Garrett assumed it was just part of building a case, but that evidence vanished under suspicious circumstances. Axel's detection logs were never admitted in court. Had someone wiped the records? Possibly. But maybe they feared the dog had found something traceable, like a stash of unique narcotics, microchips, or coded documents. He ran a hand over Axel's ears. "So what's your plan?" "I'm a wanted man. They'll say I escaped prison if this goes public." Jade stood, zipping up her first aid kit. "They already have. Local news outlets are broadcasting a manhunt for a dangerous death row inmate who killed 2 officers and fled." Garrett's heart sank. "But I didn't kill anyone." "You and I know that," she replied. "But the people in power are controlling the narrative. They'll do anything to keep you silent. We can't rely on official channels. We need something big, hard proof that exonerates you and exposes them." He shook his head in frustration. "I don't have that proof." She studied him for a long moment. "But your dog might, or at least might lead us to it. There's a chance that one of the places you and Axel investigated holds a hidden stash, paper or digital, that ties all of this back to the higher-ups." Garrett shifted, recalling half-forgotten leads. There was a deserted motel outside the city. Axel kept alerting around the back office. "I never found anything, but I wasn't able to tear the place apart. I was pulled off that lead when my captain told me to focus elsewhere." Jade's expression sharpened. "That could be it. With the right tools, maybe we can uncover what was missed. But we should move soon. If the conspirators sense we're onto something, they'll torch any evidence." Axel licked his wounded leg, though it looked cleaner now. The dog tested his weight, standing with moderate discomfort. Garrett felt a surge of resolve. "We can't just wander into that motel. We need a plan, supplies, maybe a safe place to lie low for a while." Jade motioned for them to follow her up a gentle slope along the creek. "My car is stashed a short hike from here. We'll get you both fed, patched up, and figure our next step. I've got a contact or two who might lend resources if they trust me." "Why would they trust you?" Garrett asked, not with hostility but genuine curiosity. She gave a tight smile. "I have a personal stake in this. My father was a city official. He tried to stand up against corruption in the mayor's office years ago. He died under suspicious circumstances and the case was buried. I've spent my life digging into that grave. Turns out, the rot runs deep. And I suspect the same network that got him silenced is tied to your frame job." That revelation hung between them. A mutual understanding. They each bore scars from a system rigged in favor of the powerful. Axel, sensing the emotional tension, nudged Jade's hand. The corners of her mouth twitched as if grateful for the dog's silent empathy. They continued upstream, following the winding path until the forest thinned. The chirping of birds provided a strange contrast to the urgency of their situation. After half an hour, they reached a dirt parking area, empty except for a silver SUV with tinted windows. Jade pulled out a key fob, and the vehicle chirped in response. As they climbed in, Garrett carefully guided Axel onto the back seat, where a blanket lay folded. Inside, Jade handed Garrett a water bottle and some energy bars. He ate ravenously, not realizing how hunger gnawed at him. Axel also received some dog-friendly food Jade had brought along. While the dog devoured it, Jade started the engine. "I have a friend about an hour north," she explained. He's ex-law enforcement, runs a secluded cabin turned unofficial safe haven. We can figure out our approach there." Garrett bristled at the mention of ex-law enforcement, recalling how many old friends had abandoned him at the first whiff of scandal. But Jade seemed to sense his hesitation. "Trust me," she said gently. "This guy left the force when it got too dirty. He won't betray you." For a moment, the SUV rumbled quietly as Jade navigated winding back roads. Garrett watched the forest slide by through the tinted glass. He stroked Axel's fur, feeling the dog's breathing slow as exhaustion took over. Everything had happened so fast, from certain death in a secret prison wing to this shadowy trek through the woods. Could he trust Jade's friend? Could he trust Jade? The memory of her voice, trembling with sincerity, stuck with him. Sometimes, he thought, you have to leap and hope your instincts prove right. Carefully, he let his guard down, turning to Jade. "Thank you for coming. If you hadn't shown up..." A sorrowful smile crossed her face. "I just wish we'd realized sooner how far they would go. The signs were there, but nobody expected them to pull a vanishing act like that on a death row inmate. The details we uncovered made me suspect they planned to kill you off the books." A chill crawled up his spine. "Are you sure my lawyer knows you're here?" She glanced in the rearview mirror. "He knows I'm out searching for you. He doesn't know every detail. Sometimes it's safer for him to have plausible deniability." Garrett's mind spun, recalling the lawyer's determined face during trial. Perhaps the man's own life was at risk if he got too close. Garrett sank into the seat, hoping to glean some rest while Jade kept driving. The day's events had worn him thin. Yet every time he closed his eyes, images of the prison corridor flashed, the sinister suits looming, that dreaded word disposal echoing in his mind. He forced his thoughts elsewhere, onto the motel clue. If there was indeed a hidden stash of records, it might exonerate him. He thought about the nights he and Axel had searched the property, the old floors, the cracked plaster walls. Was there a hidden panel, a false drawer, or a concealed safe in the office? Axel had kept sniffing around the back near a dusty closet. Garrett had dismissed it as likely containing old cleaning supplies. The memory now loomed large. Time blurred until the SUV turned onto a narrow gravel lane shaded by tall oaks. A simple wooden sign read, "Mason's Retreat." Several small cabins lay scattered through the property, each tucked behind wild hedges. Jade parked near the largest one. An older man in a plaid shirt and jeans stood on the porch, arms crossed. As they approached, Garrett noticed the man's piercing gray eyes, the kind that had witnessed too much. "This him?" the man said, nodding at Garrett. His gaze flicked to Axel, who had hopped out of the SUV with a grunt. "Yeah," Jade answered. "Wes, meet Garrett Rayner, and that's Axel." Wes extended a hand. Garrett hesitated only a moment before accepting the handshake. The grip was firm, though not aggressive. "You need a place to hide?" Wes asked quietly, scanning Garrett's face with a detective's practiced scrutiny. "Yes," Garrett replied, "and we need a plan to bring down whoever put me on death row." A faint grin tugged at Wes's lips. "Then you've come to the right place. Let's get you inside and patch up that wrist." They stepped into the cabin's main room, which smelled faintly of cedar. There was a flicker of a wood-burning stove in the corner, casting shadows across worn rugs and a heavy wooden table. Stacks of papers and a laptop sat scattered as though this space served as a command post. Jade helped Axel settle on a spare blanket. The dog eased onto it with relief, panting softly. Wes looked Garrett up and down. "You realize the hunt is on? They'll plaster your face on every news channel. The official story is that you escaped, killing officers in the process." Garrett's throat tightened. He had never wanted blood on his conscience, and for the record, he hadn't taken any lives. They're lying. The only people who got hurt at that place were the ones trying to kill me. Wes raised a brow. It's how the system spins it. We'll need to move carefully. He turned his gaze to Jade. You mentioned the old motel? That's our best lead, right? She nodded. Garrett and Axel searched the premises once. The dog kept indicating a spot near the manager's office. We suspect there's a hidden compartment containing incriminating evidence. Wes rubbed his chin. It's tricky. If those same people suspect that's where the evidence lies, they'll stake it out, but it's our only shot to clear Garrett's name and expose those involved. Garrett's eyes flicked between them. The moment I show my face, they'll descend like vultures. Jade inhaled slowly. We'll need a diversion. Maybe we can lure them elsewhere while you and Axel do a quick in and out. I can handle that if Wes provides backup. Wes studied a map pinned to a corkboard on the wall, a topographical layout of the region. Yes, he mused. We can orchestrate a false tip-off somewhere else, but you'll have to strike fast, grab whatever's hidden, and vanish. A crackle of possibility swept through Garrett. If they could pull this off, the truth might finally come to light. The notion buoyed him, even as the weight of danger pressed down. He lowered himself onto a chair, wincing as he adjusted his wrist. Axel curled at his feet, head resting on Garrett's shoe. Wes opened a cupboard, withdrawing antiseptics and bandages. Here, he said, motioning for Garrett to roll up his sleeve. Let's ensure you don't lose that hand to infection before you clear your name. Garrett gritted his teeth as Wes cleaned and wrapped the wound in practiced efficiency. A memory flickered. Garrett once doing something similar for a rookie officer who'd taken a bullet graze. That seemed like a lifetime ago. Now he was the one hunted like a criminal. Jade approached, placing a hand on Garrett's shoulder. I know this is overwhelming, but you're not alone anymore. We have a fighting chance if we work together. He looked at her, then down at Axel. The dog's ears twitched at the sound of Jade's voice. Outside, the wind rustled branches, as if reminding them time was short. Garrett inhaled, mustering resolve. Let's do it. Let's find what they never wanted me to uncover. Wes set the first aid supplies aside, eyes gleaming. Then get some rest. We'll finalize the plan tonight and move at dawn. For now, I have a feeling every minute of quiet could be our last. Exhaustion weighed on Garrett. The events of the past hours had battered him physically and emotionally. He nodded in agreement. Tomorrow would be a reckoning, one final push to reveal the truth or be swallowed by the shadows forever. As he gently patted Axel's head, he felt a flicker of hope. If a single dog's loyalty could lead them to salvation, then maybe fate wasn't done with him yet. Garrett slept in fits that night, haunted by the memory of chain-link fences and echoing gunfire. More than once, he jolted upright to find himself in the cabin's dimly lit room, sweat trickling down his neck. Each time, Axel stirred, lifting his head as if to check that all was well. The dog's gentle sighs were a reminder of the partnership they'd forged long ago. In a world of betrayal, it felt like Axel was the sole constant. At first light, the cabin came alive with quiet purpose. The old wood stove crackled in one corner, and the aroma of coffee brewed by Wes drifted through the air. Outside, through narrow windows, dawn's pale light illuminated a gravel driveway and the silhouettes of pine trees beyond. Garrett flexed his wrist, feeling the fresh bandage tug at his skin. The pain was manageable, though it flashed hot if he moved too quickly. He rose and saw Jade bent over a table strewn with maps and typed notes, her eyebrows knit in concentration. "We have to get you in and out before nightfall," she said as soon as Garrett approached. She tapped a spot on a rough diagram of the region. "This road leads to the old motel, about 40 miles west. The building is half collapsed. According to local chatter, It's scheduled for demolition soon. If we wait too long, we risk losing any evidence that's still inside. Wes joined them, setting a mug of coffee beside Jade. He pointed to another section of the map. We'll set up our distraction along the main highway, a good 10 miles from the motel. I have a friend named Curtis. He owes me a favor. He can stage a fake tip-off about your whereabouts, maybe sighting an armed fugitive near a truck stop. That should draw away any watchers. Garrett's eyes flicked between them. But if they suspect a trap, they won't all leave. They might keep someone posted at the motel. True, Jade replied, pursing her lips. We can't guarantee it'll be empty, but with a well-placed rumor, we stand a good chance of luring away most of their team. We'll have to rely on stealth for anyone who stays behind. From across the room, Axel loped over, tail wagging softly, as if sensing the conversation turning urgent. His limp seemed marginally better after rest, though Garrett still saw a stiffness in each stride. He crouched and placed a hand on Axel's flank. "You okay for this?" he murmured. The dog's eyes were bright, ears alert. Despite all he'd endured, Axel's spirit remained unbroken. Wes tossed Garrett a set of clothes, dark cargo pants, sturdy boots, and a black hoodie, items that fit better than the tattered jumpsuit he'd worn. Wear these. You'll blend in more easily than in anything that screams inmate. Thanks, Garrett said, stepping into a smaller side room to change. In the cracked mirror above a rough-hewn sink, he studied his face for a moment. New lines creased his forehead and stubble covered his jaw. His once trim haircut had grown ragged since he'd been on death row. But what struck him most was the hard determination in his own gaze. The man staring back was no longer just an ex-cop fighting a personal battle. He was someone who'd glimpsed the full scale of corruption and refused to vanish quietly. When he returned, Jade was packing a duffel with essentials: rope, a flashlight, some protein bars, and a first aid kit. She slipped a sleek pistol into a side holster beneath her jacket. Noticing Garrett's hesitation, she held out a second firearm. "You probably know how to handle one of these better than I do." He hesitated, recalling how taking up a gun again might cement his status as a fugitive in the eyes of law enforcement. Still, refusing would be foolish. In a controlled, grim nod, he accepted the weapon. Axel watched the exchange, ears twitching at the faint clink of metal. "So we're set?" asked Wes, moving to the front door. "Curtis has instructions to phone in the tip about an hour after we leave. That'll give us time to get near the motel before the chase picks up." Garrett inhaled slowly. "Let's do it." The morning sun emerged fully by the time they loaded into Jade's SUV. Garrett took the back seat again with Axel, while Wes slid into the passenger seat. Jade drove, navigating back roads where the tall pines gradually gave way to open fields. They spoke little, focusing on the plan. As the vehicle rumbled past scattered farmhouses, Garrett couldn't help thinking how peaceful everything looked. A world oblivious to their deadly mission. And yet behind each cluster of trees, he imagined watchers with binoculars, waiting to pounce. Before they hit the main highway, Jade veered onto a smaller paved road that meandered through farmland. She parked by a weather-beaten barn. Another car waited there, a nondescript sedan with tinted windows. Jade and Wes stepped out to speak with its driver. Garrett squinted through the windshield, seeing a bearded man inside wearing sunglasses. That must be Curtis. After a brief exchange, Jade returned, giving a thumbs up. "Curtis will wait here for our signal," she said, sliding back into the driver's seat. "He'll call in the tip from a payphone in a nearby town. That should send them scrambling." They were back on the road in minutes, pressing westward. Tension coiled in Garrett's stomach like a spring. He glanced at Axel, who was dozing yet still keyed to every jolt of the ride. Outside, farmland merged into countryside dotted with skeletal remains of old shops and motels, reminders of a time before the main interstate pulled traffic elsewhere. Finally, Jade slowed as they approached a battered sign that read Sunset Grove Motel in peeling red letters. The structure behind it was indeed half ruined. 2 stories, a row of empty windows, and a sagging roof. Yellow caution tape flapped in the breeze, presumably marking it as condemned property. Jade parked behind a thicket of bushes about 50 yards away, switching off the engine. Wes turned in his seat. "I'll keep watch out here. If anyone shows, I'll honk twice. Try to get what you need quickly." Garrett exhaled, cracking the door open. He let Axel hop out first, then followed. Jade slid from the driver's side, adjusting the holster under her jacket. The midday sun glared off broken glass in the motel parking lot, creating a shifting mosaic of brightness. They crouched low, circling around the building. Shards of old signage and cracked asphalt told stories of a once busy establishment now left to rot. Near the back office, Garrett paused. An overhang sagged with missing tiles. Greenish mold crept along the walls. Memories sharpened. This was the same spot Axel had signaled, sniffing vigorously. Could the evidence be stashed inside a secret panel or hidden floorboard? He exchanged a nod with Jade. She scanned the area for lookouts while Garrett coaxed Axel forward. The dog sniffed the dusty threshold, tail down, cautious. Inside, the air was stale and thick with decay. Strewn debris, rotted brochures, old receipts, splintered chairs, littered the small front desk area. A door behind the desk led to a manager's office, its sign hanging crookedly. That was where, all those months ago, Axel had grown restless. Jade's footsteps crunched on broken tiles. She kept her weapon drawn, gaze flicking through every shadow. "Clear so far," she whispered. Garrett nodded. "We should close that door behind us. I don't want any surprises from the hallway." She obliged, quietly swinging the office door shut. Garrett advanced, scanning for anything that looked out of place. A battered metal filing cabinet stood in one corner, empty drawers yanked out. Yet Axel ignored it. Instead, the dog padded toward a narrow closet door. It bore fresh scrapes on the handle, as though someone had forced it at some point. But it was locked. Garrett tested it gently, finding no give. Axel sniffed the base of the door, then pawed at a spot near the lower hinge. His body language was insistent. "All right," Garrett muttered, stepping back. He aimed his borrowed pistol at the lock, wincing at the noise that would follow. Jade grabbed his arm. "Let me try something quieter," she said. From her duffel, she removed a small crowbar and wedged it against the door jamb. With a series of careful motions, she applied pressure, working the metal deeper until the lock gave a soft crack. She eased the door open. Axel went in first, nose low. A swirl of stale air wafted out, carrying notes of mildew and something chemical. The closet was cramped, piled with old boxes half collapsed under mold. Jade swept the beam of her flashlight over them. "Cleaning supplies," she murmured. "All gone bad. Wait." She froze, focusing on the far side of the closet. The light revealed a rectangular outline in the plaster, faint but distinct. Garrett felt his pulse spike. "A hidden compartment," he said under his breath, stepping forward. He cleared away boxes stacked precariously, revealing a patch of wall with a hairline seam. Axel sniffed feverishly, pawing at it. Jade tapped the panel with the crowbar, the dull thud confirming an empty space behind. She chipped away the plaster edges until her fingers could get a grip. They tugged, and the panel popped free. Behind it lay a narrow recess in the wall, no bigger than a small safe. A battered metal box with a hinged lid sat there, its surface speckled with rust. Jade slid it out carefully. Garrett wiped the dust off and tested the lid. Locked. Jade nodded at him, and he used the crowbar again, snapping the flimsy latch. When he lifted the lid, they both sucked in a breath. Inside were folders stuffed with papers, a flash drive taped to one side, and what looked like bank statements with coded references. "This is it," Jade whispered. "Night Chapel must be in here. Money transfers, payoffs, client lists, maybe even orders for hits or blackmail." Garrett's fingers trembled as he lifted a document near the top. It bore the signature of a high-ranking official from his old precinct. "I knew they were dirty," he muttered, scanning the damning contents. "This ties them to a shell corporation. It's all here. They must have hidden it, planning to destroy it once the demolition started." Footsteps sounded outside, making them freeze. Axel's ears perked, and Jade extinguished her flashlight. Light footsteps, not heavy boots, but still the pattern of someone approaching. They looked at each other anxiously. Jade tucked the metal box under her arm. Garrett eased the closet door shut. Silence weighed on them. A faint creak came from the front desk area, then a shuffle of debris, as if someone were stepping carefully. Jade mouthed, "We have to go." Garrett nodded, swallowing hard. He cracked the closet door just enough to peer out. Through a gap in the office door, he glimpsed a figure wearing dark clothing. No uniform, possibly a hired gun. The figure knelt, pressing a hand to the floor as though searching for footprints. Without any sound, Garrett withdrew back into the closet, mindful that stepping out might trigger gunfire. Axel let out a low, almost imperceptible rumble. Jade looked around frantically, but the only exit from the closet led back through the office. If they tried to break out the other side, they'd risk being pinned down. They needed a diversion. Garrett motioned Jade to hand him one of the smaller boxes from the floor. He rummaged through it, finding old aerosol cans. An idea brewed. He removed one, then placed it near the closet threshold. Leaning out, he tossed a shard of wood across the office, letting it clatter. The figure snapped upright, footsteps approaching the noise. Garrett waited for just the right moment. As the figure passed the closet door, he rolled the aerosol can across the floor. It skittered loudly, drawing an exclamation. The figure lunged to stomp on it. That instant, Jade sprang into the office. She aimed her pistol at the intruder's back. "Stop right there," she snapped. The stranger froze. A single glance told Garrett this was no average thug. The posture, the build, the calm. Probably a private mercenary. Slowly, the man raised his hands. Jade kept her weapon trained, but they both knew the standoff was precarious. Garrett stepped out, the metal box tucked under one arm, pistol in hand. "Don't follow," he warned. "We're leaving." The man turned his head slightly, eyes flicking to the box. A ghost of a sneer crossed his face. "You think those papers will save you? They'll bury you deeper." Axel bared his teeth, letting out a snarl. Jade motioned for the man to face the wall, then nodded at Garrett. He carefully edged around, heading for the door. With Axel close, Garrett crossed into the hallway. Jade, walking backward, kept her aim locked. Once they were clear, she bolted after them. The entire confrontation had lasted mere seconds, but Garrett's heart thundered as if an hour had passed. Outside, the noon sun struck them with blinding intensity. Garrett shielded his eyes as they sprinted around the building. They needed to reach the SUV. If the mercenary had backup, they'd be swarmed in minutes. Jade held the metal box tight against her ribcage, and Garrett suspected it might be their only ticket to survival. Suddenly, from the far side of the parking lot, an engine roared. A black SUV peeled around the corner, tinted windows glinting. It barreled straight toward them. Jade cursed, raising her gun. Garrett considered a futile shot at the windshield. Then the black SUV veered, narrowly missing them, and screeched to a halt near the motel office. 3 more armed figures jumped out, presumably to aid their pinned comrade. "Run!" Jade yelled, pivoting. The 2 of them dashed toward the brush line. Axel kept pace, though the limp caused him to lag a step. They skirted the broken fence that ringed the property. Ahead, through a gap in the bushes, Garrett spotted Wes's vehicle. But as they burst into the clearing, a wave of relief slammed into the reality of gunfire behind them. Bullets chewed the earth, sending up plumes of dust. Jade ducked, hugging the box. Garrett spun, returning a couple of shots to keep the pursuers at bay. Axel barked, pawing the ground as if urging them on. Wes, alerted by the commotion, threw open the passenger door. The engine was running. "Hurry!" he shouted. Garrett hustled Jade forward. She practically dove into the back seat, holding the box like fragile treasure. Axel scrambled in after her, and Garrett tumbled in last. Wes stomped the accelerator, tires spitting gravel as they tore down the cracked access road. The last glimpse Garrett caught of the motel was the group of armed men racing back to their black SUV, but the angle forced them to turn around. The question was, did they have more vehicles, or would they try to tail them? Bent low in the back seat, Garrett clutched the seat's edge, adrenaline surging. Jade exhaled in ragged gasps, still hugging the box. Axel pressed against them both, eyes wide, every muscle trembling with the aftershock of near-miss violence. Finally, when they reached the main road, Wes twisted to glance at Jade. "Did you get it?" She lifted the metal box. Her voice shook. "We got everything." Garrett allowed a breath of triumph. They had seized the evidence that might topple the entire conspiracy. But in the pit of his stomach, fear still churned. Because now the real war would begin. They were no longer just fugitives. They had proof that could dismantle powerful men's lives, and those men would stop at nothing to bury it. Wes kept his foot on the gas, the scenery whipping past in a blur of dusty browns and muted greens. Every so often he checked the rearview mirror, scanning for headlights that might signal pursuit. Jade crouched in the back seat beside Garrett, the metal evidence box clutched firmly in her lap. Despite the tension humming through the car, she gingerly pried open the lid again as if to confirm their prize was real and not a desperate hallucination. Axel settled on the floor, muzzle resting near Jade's boot, still keyed up from the motel standoff. The dog's eyes flicked to every window in turn as though expecting more gunfire. Garrett reached down and brushed his fingers over Axel's ear. It wasn't a calming gesture, so much as a reminder to both of them that they were in this together, no matter how harrowing the road ahead would be. "All right," Wes said, half turning his head. "Where to now? Our cabin's too obvious. If those men tracked us to the motel, they might know about the cabin as well." "We need somewhere new," Jade agreed. She picked up a stack of papers from the box, scanning the topmost page. It was dense with typed lines and hand-annotated notes referencing shell corporations, shipping routes, and coded transactions. "I'm no analyst, but I see repeated references to Phoenix Mesa Bank along with big withdrawals flagged Night Chapel. It looks like hush money, regular payoffs to keep certain parties silent." Garrett felt anger pulse through him. "Which means I was right all along. They're funneling bribes through cutouts. But to do what? Buy off politicians? Fund a trafficking ring?" Jade flipped another page. "All of the above, maybe. Some lines reference secure shipments traveling cross-state. And look at these signatures." Her fingertip traced a scribbled name at the bottom. "This belongs to Chief Mason. And here, Captain Eddings." Garrett's stomach clenched. Captain Eddings was the officer who testified that Garrett lost control in his final case, painting him as a rogue cop. If Eddings was in on this, the entire precinct's hierarchy could be compromised. "We have to ensure this evidence gets into the right hands," he said. "We can't march into the local police station, or they'll just bury it again." "We could try a federal angle," Jade suggested, "like the FBI, but only if we find an agent untouched by local corruption, and we don't have time to test that trust. One slip, and these men will destroy us." Wes took a hard turn onto a side road, causing gravel to spray. "We can't stay on public highways." If they broadcast an APB on your license plate, he nodded at Jade, we'll be easy pickings. I know a network of logging roads north of here that lead to small towns. Some are too remote for a quick response from our enemies. Good, Jade said, carefully replacing the documents inside the box. We can hunker down in one of those towns temporarily and sift through everything. There might be a smoking gun, a single piece that proves your innocence beyond doubt. Garrett exhaled, glancing at the passing tree lines, though relief fluttered inside him at having this trove of incriminating paperwork. He knew each page was also a target on their backs. Let's just pray nobody's tailing us. If we can vanish for long enough to connect with the right people, we have a shot. Axel whined, shifting to nudge Garrett's leg. The dog's bandaged wound seemed stable, but exhaustion weighed on him. Garrett murmured soft reassurance, then pressed a palm over the back seat to steady himself as Wes bumped along rutted roads. The SUV's suspension groaned, but the vehicle chugged on. They drove for what felt like an hour, zigzagging through a patchwork of farmland and scrubby forest. Occasionally they spotted dust trails behind them, but none ever drew close enough to be a threat. Tension still thickened the air. Jade leaned her head back, eyes closed, as if mentally reviewing their next steps. Eventually, the road crested a gentle rise, and an old wooden sign came into view. Welcome to Ridge Lake, Pop. 1254. The place looked like a forgotten mountain town, its cluster of buildings hugging the foothills. A sun-bleached gas station sat near the turnoff. Beyond it, a small diner advertised homemade pies. They drove slowly along the single main street, passing a shuttered general store and a lone motel with a flickering neon vacancy sign. Wes pulled into a gravel parking area behind the diner. Let's eat, he suggested. We can't plan on empty stomachs. Jade hesitated. We shouldn't risk being seen. Wes countered. We'll be quick. A local diner in a small town is the last place they'd expect to spot a group of fugitives. Just keep your faces low and we can slip out if trouble arrives. They agreed. Garrett left Axel in the SUV with windows cracked and a bowl of water. The dog needed rest, and bringing a limping German Shepherd inside would draw attention. Before locking the door, Garrett gave Axel a gentle pat, whispering, "We'll be back soon." The dog's gaze followed him intently, but he settled in the back seat, head on paws. Inside the diner, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and a faint smell of coffee and fried bacon filled the air. A single waitress cleared plates from a corner booth, and an older man in a baseball cap sat at the counter, sipping from a mug. Otherwise, it was empty. They chose a booth near the exit. Jade and Wes took the side facing the wall, while Garrett sat opposite. The waitress approached, her name tag reading Leanne. She smiled politely. "Morning. Coffee to start?" "Sure," said Wes, scanning the menu. Garrett noticed Jade's eyes flick to the front windows, watchful. The tension had made them all hyper-vigilant, but to Leanne it likely just seemed like another trio of weary travelers. Garrett debated whether to remove the hood from his sweatshirt. He decided to keep it up. "I'll have scrambled eggs and toast," he said softly when Leanne returned with coffees. Jade ordered oatmeal. Wes asked for pancakes. The waitress jotted notes, poured extra coffee, and disappeared behind the counter. Jade leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. "While we wait for the food, let's see if we can glean any more from those papers." She carefully withdrew a folded page from her jacket. "I grabbed this specifically. It mentions a controlled operation set for next week involving local officials and large sums of money." Garrett read the page. His pulse kicked up. "They're planning a meeting. Looks like some major exchange or payoff. The location is coded, but maybe we can decode it. If we figure out where they'll gather, we might catch them red-handed." Wes sipped his coffee. "That's dangerous. We'd be facing a bunch of heavily armed criminals, plus crooked officials." We wouldn't have to confront them, Jade reasoned. If we tip off the right federal task force at the right moment, they could arrive with enough manpower to make arrests. Meanwhile, the media could be on standby to broadcast the takedown. Garrett felt a spark of determination. It could also fully clear my name if they see that I was investigating them. But we'd need to ensure no one in that federal team is compromised. Their hushed conversation was interrupted by a squeaking door at the front. A pair of travelers entered wearing hiking gear, presumably passing through the mountains. Neither gave the trio more than a casual glance. Still, Garrett's instincts prickled. He forced himself to focus on the half-coded snippet in front of him. Shipment arrives 22 Auraig, NW Quadrant, retainer 200K, soft infiltration recommended, payment funnel, PMB, Phoenix Mesa Bank, contact, Redwood Sparrow. Wes frowned. Redwood Sparrow could be a code name, or maybe Redwood is a place. Jade traced her finger over NW Quadrant. They could mean the northwest corner of the state. Redwood could be Redwood County. That's up there near the old lumber mills. Sparrow might refer to an individual or a site. Garrett recalled a half-forgotten detail from the final days before his arrest. A tip about Redwood County hosting secret shipments for an unnamed organization. He had assumed it was just rumors. It lines up with what I heard, he said. Maybe the big meeting is planned there. The question is, how do we decode the rest and figure out the exact spot? Leanne returned with their plates, forcing them to tuck the page discreetly beneath the table. Jade thanked her, stirring sugar into her oatmeal. The waitress lingered a moment, idly smoothing her uniform apron. Haven't seen you folks around hiking? Wes nodded casually. Just passing through. Been on the road a while. Enjoy, she said, before stepping away with a final polite smile. They ate methodically, each bite tasting surreal under the weight of looming danger. Garrett realized it was the first real meal he'd had outside prison walls in far too long. The flavors of scrambled eggs and toasted bread were almost jarringly normal, considering everything that had happened since dawn. Halfway through the meal, Jade's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then looked up sharply. Curtis, she whispered to Wes, sliding out of the booth to take the call by the door. Garrett watched her posture stiffen as she spoke in low tones. A minute later, she returned, face grim. Curtis placed the call like we planned, but they got wise fast. The local PD claims they verified the tip was fake. She bit her lip. I suspect they have inside info. He says unmarked vehicles were seen heading in the direction of the old motel. Wes cursed under his breath. We got out just in time. Garrett pushed aside his half-eaten eggs. We need to vanish again. If they suspect a hoax, they'll intensify the search in likely hideouts. This town might be next. Jade nodded. Finish your coffee. We'll slip out in 5. They paid in cash. As they headed for the door, Garrett caught Leanne's faintly curious expression. He realized how they must look, tense, each wearing dark clothes, paying in rumpled bills. He offered a brief nod as they left, though it did little to ease her suspicion. Back at the SUV, Garrett checked on Axel, who lifted his head and let out a happy chuff at Garrett's return. The dog's tail gave a feeble wag, but his eyes were alert. Jade climbed behind the wheel and Wes hopped in front again. Garrett settled next to Axel, letting the dog's comforting warmth ground him. So Redwood County, Jade said, starting the engine. If that's our best clue, we should go there before they suspect it. Wes responded slowly. We'll need gear. Some place to stay that's not on official records. Jade glanced in the rearview mirror. I know a woman who used to run a halfway house for battered women. She might shelter us quietly. It's a few towns from Redwood County, but close enough to stage ourselves. Garrett exhaled. If Redwood County is the epicenter of their next operation, That's where we can gather the final proof. But we should try to glean more from those documents. There must be a date, a specific location. Otherwise, we'll be flying blind. A plan began to crystallize. Find a safe location, decode the files, prepare to intercept or expose the meeting. Danger aside, it felt oddly invigorating to be on the offensive rather than waiting to be silenced. Axel rested his chin on Garrett's knee, as though to say, "Let's do this." They pulled onto the highway again, heading north. The mountains loomed in the distance, crowned with evergreens that looked almost black under midday sun. Although the roads were open and traffic scarce, Garrett remained tense, eyes flicking to each new car that came into view. He half expected the black SUV from before to emerge in the rearview mirror. Yet mile after mile passed uneventfully, the rolling countryside occasionally broken by clusters of cabins or farmland. The quiet was unsettling. Jade and Wes conferred in low voices about their next pit stop, referencing an unmarked route that would lead them into Redwood territory without attracting attention. Garrett let his thoughts wander. If Redwood County truly held the heart of Nightchapel's operation, it could be the final battlefield. His phone, acquired from the cabin, unregistered, remained silent. No messages from the lawyer, no news bulletins about the incident at the motel. The conspirators likely wanted to minimize publicity, handling everything in the shadows. He wondered about that mercenary sneer. The man had implied that no matter what Garrett did, the evidence would only get him buried deeper. An unsettling question gnawed at him. Would revealing the truth be enough, or had the system grown too rotten for justice to prevail? He pushed the doubt aside. One step at a time. They had the box, they had leads, they had each other. And if luck held, enough moral grit to see it through. An hour into the drive, they turned onto a narrow road that meandered through thick forest. Jade slowed, scanning the tree line for a hidden driveway. Finally, she found it, a faint path leading to a cluster of small cottages. She guided the SUV over ruts and rocks until they reached a modest house with chipping paint and a tidy porch. An older woman stepped outside, shoulders squared, eyes wary. Jade parked and got out, motioning for Garrett and Wes to stay put. While Jade spoke to the woman, Garrett let Axel stretch his legs, walking the dog near a stand of pines. Overhead, the clouds threatened afternoon rain. Axel sniffed at pine cones scattered among the roots. Despite the swirling chaos of their lives, Garrett felt a fleeting moment of calm, listening to the breeze rustle needles. A few minutes later, Jade returned. "She's willing to let us stay the night. We can't linger too long, she doesn't want trouble, but it's private enough to lay low while we decode more of the files." Wes hopped out, collecting the duffel. "Then let's do it. The sooner we figure out Redwood County's puzzle, the better." Inside, the house smelled faintly of lavender. The woman, a stoic figure named Frances, pointed them to a small guest room, not asking questions. Jade thanked her quietly, slipping her some cash. Axel settled on a rug in the corner, as though grateful for any moment of stillness. Garrett gingerly set the metal box on a battered wooden table. "All right," Jade murmured, opening the lid. "Let's start unraveling Redwood County." Silence fell as they sifted each sheet of paper, scanning references, cross-checking addresses, decoding hints about Redwood, NW Quadrant, and the date. In the corner, Wes typed on a laptop, occasionally muttering curses when firewalls or missing pieces stalled him. Garrett lifted a single yellowed page, brow creasing. It held columns of numbers that didn't match bank statements. Coordinates, he guessed, reading them carefully. Latitude and longitude, maybe. Redwood Sparrow. Could that be a meeting place near Redwood Lake or Redwood Falls? Jade's eyes lit. Yes, Redwood Falls. I recall hearing about an abandoned paper mill there. If those numbers match that location, she glanced at Wes, who input them. Moments later, he nodded. Coordinates line up with an old mill just west of Redwood Falls. It's about a 5-hour drive from here. Could be the staging ground for whatever big payoff they're planning. Garrett felt a surge of grim satisfaction. They had a target. If they could arrive stealthily and record the conspirators in action, maybe alert a reliable federal contact, they'd expose everything: the murders, the bribes, the framing. He turned to Jade. "We need to confirm the date and time. That file said 22-0, but which day?" Wes frowned, flipping through more pages. "We see multiple references to Friday in these logs. That's 3 days away. So in 72 hours, some massive illegal exchange might happen." Jade set her jaw. "Then we have to be there, but we also need to prepare. They'll bring armed men. We need eyes, cameras, an exit strategy, and a fast way to share proof if we're cornered." Garrett's pulse hammered with anticipation. The next days would be a race. One last chance to prove his innocence before the conspirators found him first. He glanced at Axel, who was dozing now, chest rising and falling steadily. "We do this carefully," he said. "No more close calls. One slip, they'll kill us on sight." Jade pressed her lips into a thin line. "Agreed. We coordinate with someone outside their reach, maybe an independent journalist or a contact with a proven record of integrity. Even if we go down, the story won't." Wes closed the laptop, exhaustion edging his voice. "We can start making calls tomorrow, figure out who can help. Tonight we rest, plan, and keep watch, because after this, Redwood Falls is the final act." They each fell silent, letting the magnitude of it settle like dust on a windowsill. 3 days to outsmart an entrenched network that had already proven lethal. Still, as Jade gently placed the coded documents back into the box, as Wes jotted coordinates on a notepad, and as Axel slept unperturbed in the corner, Garrett felt the stirrings of hope. For the first time since he'd been shackled in that prison yard, he sensed that truth might triumph, if they had the courage to see it through. He recalled the judge's cold voice pronouncing his sentence, the clang of the cell door on his first night behind bars, the vile stench of that clandestine facility. The conspirators believed they had snuffed out his future. Yet here he was, armed with evidence that could topple them all. He met Jade's gaze. She gave a small, resolute nod. No more running in circles. By facing Redwood Falls, they would either reclaim justice or perish in the attempt. "Then it's settled," Garrett said softly, resting a hand on Axel's flank. "We strike in 3 days. Let them think we're cornered. We'll show them what happens when a cop they tried to bury refuses to stay dead." Night overcame the modest house more quietly than Garrett would have expected, given the storm of events swirling just out of sight. A single yellow bulb flickered on the front porch, while inside he and Jade pored over the records on the small dining table. Outside those walls, an invisible clock ticked toward the showdown in Redwood County. 3 days, 72 hours to prepare for a confrontation that would test them all. Wes had rigged a makeshift surveillance perimeter using motion sensors he salvaged from old hunting cameras. He claimed it would at least warn them of any approach on the narrow gravel lane. Frances, the house's owner, stayed mostly in her own quarters, giving them space, though her gaze held a quiet wariness when she passed by. Garrett sensed she wanted to help, but dreaded the danger they might bring upon her home. "I don't want to push our luck with Frances," Jade said, sipping from a chipped mug of lukewarm coffee. "She's already risking a lot by letting us stay." Garrett nodded, scanning a line of text on a typed memo referencing Redwood Falls. "We'll be gone by morning. We still have so much to do: gear, finalizing our plan, figuring out how we'll record proof without getting ourselves killed." From the far corner, Axel lifted his head. He'd been dozing on a tattered cushion, recovering from the frantic events at the abandoned motel. When he noticed Garrett's eyes, the dog thumped his tail once, a quiet show of solidarity. Garrett offered a faint smile. The dog's unwavering loyalty was a steady comfort. "Let's talk through the infiltration," said Wes, stepping into the room. He laid a folded roadmap on the table, then drew a crude circle around a patch of wilderness adjacent to Redwood Falls. That's where the abandoned paper mill should be. According to satellite images, it's a sprawling set of buildings along an old waterway, mostly collapsed. If they're planning a covert exchange, that spot offers cover. Jade traced her fingertip along a faint dirt road leading to the mill. "I doubt they'll arrive in a convoy with flashing lights. More likely they'll trickle in using multiple unmarked vehicles. Any infiltration by us has to happen before their main players gather. Once they realize we're there, it becomes a shooting gallery." Garrett leaned back, the old wood chair creaking beneath him. "We need two priorities: capturing evidence on film and ensuring a secure exit. If we can slip out and deliver that footage directly to some trusted official or broadcast it live online, they can't hush it up." Wes produced a battered digital camera and a portable phone. "These are yours. The phone can live stream, provided we get a signal. Redwood Falls is remote, so there's a chance we won't have reliable coverage, but we'll try. I've also got some older gear, body cams from my days as a private contractor. One or two might still work." Jade nodded. "We can hide a camera in a vantage point overlooking the mill. If we manage to record the meeting, we'd have visual proof of who shows up, and that alone could crack this wide open." A hush settled as they contemplated the magnitude of confronting crooked police brass, possibly politicians, and the security teams behind Nightchapel. Garrett placed a hand gently on Axel's back. "We'll need the dog's nose to navigate, but he's still nursing that leg wound. I don't want him in direct harm's way unless necessary." Axel cocked his head, as if protesting. Jade's lips curved in a faint grin. "I suspect he'll want to stay by your side no matter what. But we'll be smart. Let's finalize the plan in Redwood County tomorrow. By Friday night, we'll be in position." They spent the next hour mapping out details, scribbling notes on scratch paper. The tension weighed on Garrett like an invisible chain. Each passing minute, he feared a fresh wave of mercenaries would burst through the door, yet the house remained still and quiet, cocooned by darkness. Eventually, Frances tapped on the frame of the open doorway, her voice soft. "I made some stew, if you all are hungry." Wes smiled politely. "We appreciate that more than you know." They gathered in the cramped kitchen. The stew was simple: beans, vegetables, a bit of smoked meat. Yet it tasted like a banquet after the stress and near starvation of their flight. Garrett ate methodically, body still taut. Axel, too, enjoyed a bowl of kibble mixed with stew broth. His tail wagged slowly, a soldier's small reward after battle. Frances lingered at the edge of the room. At length she asked, "How long do you plan to stay?" Her tone carried no malice, just concern. Jade glanced at Garrett before responding. "We'll be gone by dawn. We only needed a safe place to lay low." Frances seemed to accept that. She looked at Axel with a gentle curiosity. "Does he bite?" Garrett shook his head. "Only if threatened. He's a trained police dog, loyal, calm." The older woman managed a tiny smile, perhaps remembering gentler days. Without further questions, she left them to their meal. As they finished eating, Wes wiped his mouth and stood. "I'll do a final perimeter sweep. Jade, maybe you can start checking that camera gear. Garrett, see if there's anything you need for tomorrow." Garrett gave a curt nod. He followed Jade back to the dining table, where she laid out an assortment of electronic devices, a half-functional laptop, a couple of worn body cams, and spare batteries. He tested a body cam's LED, found it flickered, but eventually settled on a dim glow. Jade frowned, fiddling with the device. "It might last a while, but I don't trust it for hours of footage. That's why we'll use multiple backups," Garrett said, rummaging through the duffel for the digital camera. "We can carry this main cam plus my phone for live broadcasting. The body cam is an extra measure." Jade handed him a coil of wire and a small memory card. "Transfer any captured video to this card if we can. Then, even if the device is destroyed, we still have the footage." They tested the camera for a few minutes, making sure it recorded smoothly. Meanwhile, outside, Wes's footsteps crunched over gravel. Garrett shot a few test images of Axel, who stared back with mild curiosity. Then Jade replayed the footage, nodding in satisfaction. "Good enough for government work," she joked, though her grin was taut. Night pressed deeper. A single lamp illuminated the living area, casting elongated shadows across the floor. Axel finally settled near Garrett's feet. From time to time, the dog's ears twitched as though attuned to distant sounds the humans couldn't hear. Garrett tried to calm his racing mind, but too much loomed. Redwood Falls, the secret rendezvous, the possibility of clearing his name after so long in disgrace. Would it really all end in 3 days? He recalled the cold fury on that mercenary's face at the motel. If these conspirators realized the stolen files were heading toward Redwood Falls, they would flood the region with men and firepower. A single slip would mean swift, lethal payback. The thought spurred him to gather every shred of determination he had. He couldn't fall now, not when vindication was so close. A short time later, Wes re-entered, his expression grim. "Road's quiet. No sign of watchers, though that doesn't mean they won't come. Best if we keep an overnight rotation. 2 hours each, staying awake with a good vantage from the window." He pointed to a corner near the front. "I'll do the first watch." Garrett and Jade agreed. She would take the second shift and Garrett the final one before dawn. With that settled, they rummaged for blankets in a back closet and prepared makeshift sleeping spots on the living room floor. Axel curled by Garrett's side, resting his chin on Garrett's ankle as if to anchor him. Before lying down, Jade gathered the evidence box and stowed it beneath a loose floorboard Francis had quietly shown her earlier, another measure of protection in case intruders appeared. Then she flicked off the main lamp, letting the soft glow from the porch filter in through a curtained window. Wes took his post at the window seat, a cup of coffee in one hand and his pistol resting on a small table. Garrett lowered himself onto the floor, using his folded sweatshirt as a pillow. Jade settled near him, the tension in her shoulders slowly easing. Axel let out a contented huff, as if trying to dispel the day's anxieties. For a while, Garrett stared at the ceiling, silent. He could almost hear the hum of Jade's thoughts, the faint scraping of Wes's foot on the window ledge. Despite the constant undercurrent of dread, a strange peace filled the house. No sirens, no barking orders, no flashing lights. Just 3 determined souls and a dog gathered on the edge of a high-stakes confrontation. Eventually, sleep claimed him in fragments, dreams half-formed, images of Redwood Falls, boarded windows, swirling dust motes, looming silhouettes. He heard a voice calling his name, an echo from that day in court when the judge sealed his fate. Then it blended with the memory of Axel's bark in that bleak prison corridor. He stirred, half awake, the living room's hush a reminder that he was free for now. He drifted again until a soft hand on his shoulder roused him. Jade's voice whispered in the dark, "Garrett, your turn." Through the window, he could see the faintest glimmer of pre-dawn light. He quietly stood, collecting himself, and nodded at Jade, who sank into his warm spot on the floor. In the hushed stillness, Garrett took position by the window. Axel, dog-like reflex kicking in, rose to follow him. He gently coaxed Axel back onto the blanket. "Stay, buddy," he murmured. The dog settled with a sigh. Outside, shapes of pine stood tall and silent. The only movement was a swirl of mist in the yard. At intervals, a gentle breeze nudged the porch swing. He scanned the road beyond the yard, noticing no headlights or silhouettes. The night was deep enough that he could see a speckling of stars overhead. In prison, that simple sight was foreign. His only view was a narrow slit of glass or the rec yard's harsh floodlights. The memory stung. All those nights he'd prayed for a miracle that never came. Yet ironically, the miracle had arrived in the form of a clandestine operation that tried to kill him. Fate had a way of turning nightmares into new beginnings. Pressing a hand to the window frame, he tried to imagine a future where his name was cleared, where he and Axel could walk the streets without fear, and perhaps where Jade would remain in his life beyond all of this. A week ago, that would have felt impossible. Now, it was the only outcome he allowed himself to hope for. The minutes slipped by, each one etched with the quiet rustling of leaves and the soft rhythm of Wes's light snoring. Jade had drifted off and Axel dozed, his ears occasionally twitching. Garrett remained vigilant, peering through the darkness for any sign of threat. His wounded wrist ached. He'd almost grown used to the dull throb. He absent-mindedly massaged the bandage, all the while rehearsing in his mind how Redwood Falls might unfold. Dawn's first glow stained the horizon. He checked his watch, nearing 5. They would likely depart soon, heading farther into remote territory. Time to get the others up. Gently, he nudged Wes's shoulder. The older man stirred, blinking blearily. "Morning," Wes grumbled. "It's close. Let's pack and go before the day catches us." Wes yawned. "Right, I'll get the SUV ready." Garrett knelt by Jade, resting a hand on her arm. She opened her eyes, blinking away sleep. A faint smile tugged at her lips. "Any trouble?" "None," he said, "but we need to move." She stretched and stood, groaning softly. Within minutes, they folded blankets, returned them to their original spot, and retrieved the hidden evidence box from beneath the floor. Axel rose and shook himself awake, tail wagging tentatively. Garrett patted his side, grateful the dog still seemed mobile despite the injury. Before stepping out, Jade quietly thanked Francis, who only gave a quick nod, wishing them well with eyes that spoke volumes of her concern. The trio slipped into the dawn-chilled air. A faint fog clung to the yard, swirling around their ankles. Axel sniffed the ground, alert but calm. They loaded the SUV, double-checking their supplies. As Wes started the engine, Garrett squinted back at the small house. In another life, he might have never crossed paths with people like Francis or Jade. The old him, an upright detective who trusted the system, would have followed official protocols. Yet those protocols had condemned him to die. Now, forging alliances on the run, he realized that real loyalty sprang from shared purpose, not a badge or a bureaucratic oath. The tires crunched across gravel as they pulled away, leaving the safety of Francis's property behind. Ahead lay Redwood Falls, the paper mill, and the fate of Nightchapel's conspirators. Axel settled at Garrett's feet in the back seat, his gaze scanning the windows as if he too sensed they were heading toward a final battle. Neither Jade nor Wes spoke much as the road unfurled. Garrett closed his eyes briefly, centering himself. Soon the city of Redwood Falls would loom on the horizon, with all its hidden corners and possible ambushes. One truth anchored him: they had come too far to turn back now. If the conspirators wanted their silence, they would have to fight for it, and Garrett Rayner, once a doomed ex-cop, was no longer afraid. The road into Redwood Falls wound through a low valley, the kind of terrain that could swallow secrets. Towering evergreens closed in on either side, branches thick with shadows even under daylight. A battered sign announced the city limits, though the place felt less like a city and more like a once-thriving mill town caught in slow decay. Garrett peered out from the back seat. Axel pressed at his side, trying to gauge if their arrival was already noticed by watchful eyes. Jade downshifted, easing the SUV onto a spur that bypassed the main thoroughfare. From there, they caught glimpses of weathered storefronts, a shuttered diner, and a row of dull clapboard houses. The old paper mill, according to their map, lay half a mile downriver from the center of town. A wooden footbridge arched over the muddy water. Even from a distance, Garrett could see part of the mill's roof missing, sunlight slicing through broken rafters. "Not a bustling metropolis," Wes remarked, twisting to look at Garrett. "We can hide, but so can our enemies. If they suspect we're here, it won't be long before they dispatch watchers." Jade slowed by a vacant lot choked with weeds. "Let's see if we can set up on foot," she said. "No sense driving straight to the site. We should stash the car somewhere inconspicuous." She turned onto a narrow dirt lane that led behind a rundown warehouse. Rusted chain-link fencing leaned precariously along the edges. The SUV's tires crunched across gravel until they reached a secluded spot under a canopy of oak trees. Jade killed the engine. For a moment, none of them moved, listening, scanning. Axel lifted his muzzle, sniffing the damp air. "Let's do a quick recon," Garrett murmured. "Wes, maybe you stay with the vehicle as backup. Jade and I can approach on foot, see how close we can get without being spotted." Wes nodded. "Agreed. If anything goes sideways, call my phone. I'll be here with the rest of our gear ready to roll in if you need help." They stepped out. The wind carried a faint tang of pine and rotting wood. Jade grabbed the battered digital camera and pocketed a small notepad. Garrett eased the door open for Axel, who hopped down carefully, still favoring his injured leg. He bent to check the bandage, intact, though it would need changing soon. Axel wagged his tail once, letting out a soft huff as if to say he was up for whatever came next. Wes lifted a hand, a signal of silent encouragement, then disappeared into the shadow of the warehouse. Jade and Garrett began making their way along the back lanes of Redwood Falls, ducking behind overgrown shrubs and half-collapsed fences. The sun sat high overhead, gilding the battered rooftops in a harsh midday glare. Every so often they heard a distant car engine, but the streets here were largely deserted. Within 10 minutes they arrived near the river's edge, where a narrow band of trees concealed them from the main road. Through the trunks, Garrett glimpsed the old mill, a sprawling structure of corrugated metal walls and broken windows perched on a sagging foundation beside the water. A battered chain-link fence ringed the property, though huge sections had collapsed. A sign read, "No trespassing, danger in peeling paint." Jade crouched behind a log, lifting the camera's zoom lens. "Looks deserted," she said quietly, focusing on the building's entrance. "But we can't assume we're alone. Let's circle around to that ridge on the north side." Garrett scanned for any movement. Nothing but the occasional flap of a loose metal sheet in the breeze. Axel trotted at his heels, nose low. The dog seemed uneasy, ears flicking at each stray sound. Together they moved under the cover of bushes, following a narrow deer path that skirted the fence line. Twigs snapped underfoot. At one point, Axel halted and sniffed a broken beer bottle, possibly left by teenagers or squatters who used the mill for shelter. Soon they reached the base of a rocky slope. High above them rose a small wooded ridge that could offer a vantage point over the entire mill complex. If the conspirators planned a clandestine meeting, that vantage might let them record everything from a safe distance. Jade started up the slope. The soil was loose, dotted with pine needles and stones. Garrett followed, keeping a hand near Axel's harness in case the dog slipped. The climb wasn't too steep, but the air felt heavier with every step, as though something in that abandoned place radiated menace. At last, they reached a flattened outcrop. From there they could see the mill's full sprawl, a main building with a collapsed roof, 2 smaller annexes, and a yard filled with rusted drums and twisted metal scraps. The river meandered alongside, reflecting the mid-afternoon sun in dull glints. Jade lifted the camera, snapping a few test shots. "Hard to see any fresh footprints from here," she murmured, "but it's a prime location for a covert gathering. Easy road access, multiple entry points, and far from prying neighbors." Garrett nodded. "We should mark vantage spots now. When the day comes, we'll know exactly where to position the cameras." They crept closer along the ridgeline, finding a spot partly hidden by a thick juniper tree. Jade parted the branches to peer down. "This is probably our best angle on the yard. We'll see who arrives, what vehicles, and if they try to stash anything." Axel sniffed around, occasionally glancing to Garrett for reassurance. The dog seemed keyed up, though there was no immediate threat in sight. Carefully, Garrett sank to one knee, patting Axel's side. "Good boy. Stay close." He glanced at Jade. "If they gather here on Friday night, 2 days from now, someone might come early to secure the area. We should watch for signs of recent activity. Maybe check inside if we dare." Her brow furrowed. "It's risky, but if we find a place to hide a camera inside one of the annexes, we might catch them in the act." "Let's do a quick interior sweep," he decided. "We'll keep it brief." They backtracked from the ridge, descending carefully toward the perimeter fence. In places, entire sections lay flattened. Still, Jade paused to ensure no fresh footprints stood out in the soft dirt. She pointed to a set of tracks near a rusted gate, half a dozen boot prints. Garrett bent down, comparing them to Jade's shoe size. These were larger, spaced widely. Not brand new, but not ancient either. "Somebody's been here," Jade muttered. "Could have been days ago, or maybe last night." They slipped through a gap in the fence, stepping into the weed-choked yard. Tall grass brushed Garrett's calves. The odor of damp rust and old chemicals intensified. Broken crates were piled haphazardly near one annex, and battered signage hinted at the mill's past operations: pulp processing, water treatment, offices. Axel skirted around a puddle of oily residue, nose wrinkling at the stench. Garrett directed them toward a side door that hung crooked on its hinges. He eased it open, revealing a cavernous space scattered with debris. Shafts of sunlight pierced holes in the roof, illuminating dust motes. Bits of machinery lay tipped over, and metal walkways above sagged precariously. He heard a faint drip echo from somewhere deeper. "Stay alert," Jade whispered, camera ready. They advanced into the gloom, footsteps echoing. Once their eyes adjusted, they saw that half the floor was covered in charred remains, burn marks from an old fire. A makeshift arrangement of crates in one corner suggested squatters had used the place, yet no signs of life now. Abruptly, Axel stiffened. Garrett noticed the dog's tail go rigid. With a silent hand signal, an old reflex from his canine days, he told Axel to show what he'd found. The dog sniffed along a row of fallen steel beams, then pressed his nose against a crate. Garrett gingerly lifted the lid. Inside lay tattered sleeping bags, a few empty cans, and a small discarded phone battery. "Someone's camped here recently," Jade noted, scanning the empties. "A couple of days, maybe. Could be random drifters, or it could be watchers." Garrett lifted a dark hoodie tangled in the crate. The size suggested a tall male. No labels or clues, though. He glanced around, heart pounding. "We should hurry. No telling if they'll return." They moved deeper, checking corners. The air felt colder in the unlit recesses. Eventually, they found a metal staircase leading to a mezzanine that overlooked the main floor. From that vantage, Jade captured more photos. A side window gave a partial view of the yard. With the right setup, they could mount a small camera here, hidden behind old beams, to record the entire interior if a meeting took place within these walls rather than outside. But as they surveyed the spot, Garrett's phone vibrated in his pocket. He tensed, pulling it out. A text from Wes flashed, "Possible visual, truck near warehouse." They exchanged tense looks. "We need to get out," Jade said. "If that's them, they might start sweeping the area." Nodding, Garrett gestured for Axel to follow. Their footsteps quickened, echoing off battered walls. Once outside, they slipped along the fence line. The hush of the yard felt menacing, as if the old mill waited to swallow intruders. Garrett's heart thumped with the knowledge that their presence here might be a prelude to confrontation. If Nightchapel's agents already roamed Redwood Falls, they could appear at any moment. They retraced their path to the gap where they'd entered, but instead of going straight for the ridgeline, they took a more circuitous route. Jade led them around an overgrown drainage ditch that paralleled the property boundary. Axel splashed into shallow water, then shook off droplets, forging ahead. At last, they rounded the corner of a graffiti-strewn wall and emerged onto the outer street. No vehicles in sight, but Garrett felt eyes on them. Staying low, they headed back to the hidden SUV behind the abandoned warehouse. Wes waited, tension in every line of his posture. A dark pickup rolled by, he said in a low voice as they approached. "Didn't see the license. It slowed, then kept going. Could be nothing, could be them." Jade handed the camera to Wes. "We found signs of recent activity inside. Boot prints, a campsite, maybe watchers. Still, no direct confrontation. We're safe for now." Wes exhaled. "We need to relocate. If they're scouting the area, we'll stand out." Garrett nodded. "We got enough to plan our final approach, but we need real cover until the night of the meeting." Jade opened the SUV's rear door, letting Axel hop in. "Let's push further out of town. We can find a motel or campsite that's not too close. We'll watch from a distance, then slip back in on Friday night." Wes already had the engine running. As soon as Garrett settled in the back, Jade joined him. The tension inside the vehicle crackled like static. It was one thing to run a quick recon. Now they faced 2 days of lying low, ensuring they weren't tracked, and preparing for a carefully timed infiltration that could turn lethal. They pulled away from Redwood Falls on a winding secondary road. Past a weather-beaten sign, they spotted small cabins for rent, half of them boarded up. Jade slowed at the sight. "Might be a good place to hunker down," she said. "If there's a caretaker, we can pay cash, no questions asked." Wes shrugged. "Worth a shot." They turned onto a gravel path leading to a clapboard cabin labeled with a worn number 3. A hand-painted sign read, "Keys at office." But the office was just a wooden shed near the entrance, seemingly abandoned. Jade left the SUV idling while she and Garrett got out. Axel peered from the back seat, ears half lifted. The caretaker was nowhere to be seen, though a dusty sign-out sheet pinned by the shed indicated minimal visitors in recent months. At length, Jade jimmied open a side window of cabin 3 with a prying tool, slipping inside. Garrett followed quietly. The interior was musty, the air stale from disuse, but at least the roof seemed intact. A single bed frame, a rickety table, and a lamp missing its shade suggested that comfort was minimal. Yet the place offered solitude. They reopened the front door from the inside, letting Wes enter with their gear. Axel bounded in, sniffing corners. No alarm sounded, no caretaker arrived. It felt like Redwood Falls had left this property to time and neglect. "All right," Jade said, dropping her duffel. "This is our base for the next 2 days. We'll keep watch, plan carefully, and return to the mill at nightfall on Friday." Wes glanced around, face set in weary acceptance. "We'll have to fetch some supplies. Food, more bandages for Axel's wound, maybe a battery pack for the camera. But we do it discreetly. No drawing attention in town." Garrett moved to the grimy window, wiping a spot to see outside. The sun was dipping westward, painting the surrounding pines in amber. Despite the day's tension, a strange calm stole over him. He pressed a hand to his bandaged wrist, acknowledging that their final move was almost within reach. Beyond those hills, shadowy figures prepared for a secret exchange. On Friday night, the truth would emerge, or everything they'd fought for would crumble. Axel trotted over, tail wagging softly. Garrett knelt to ruffle the fur on his neck. "Just a bit longer," he murmured, voice thick with determination. "We'll prove we're not what they think. We'll expose them all." Jade and Wes exchanged glances that hinted at cautious hope. None of them spoke further. The hush of the empty cabin pressed in, and they allowed it to cradle them. Outside, twilight beckoned, the edges of the sky darkening into purple. Sooner than any of them liked, Friday would dawn, and with it, the moment of reckoning. They settled into the rundown cabin as best they could, trying to keep a low profile in the cluster of abandoned rentals. No caretaker appeared, no curious neighbors came by, and the only sounds at night were the distant chorus of crickets and the rush of wind through the pines. For Garrett, those first hours felt like a strange interlude between battles, an uneasy calm in which he and his allies prepared for a confrontation that loomed just beyond the horizon. They inventoried what supplies they had: canned food, dried snacks, several jugs of water, and a few items Wes grabbed earlier from a local store while posing as a casual fisherman. Jade spent time patching Axel's bandage, stroking the dog's fur and examining the slight swelling around the wound. Garrett observed quietly, noticing how Axel's ears flicked in Jade's direction. Over the past days, a bond had formed between dog and woman, almost as if Axel understood she was risking her life to free his master from a false conviction. Meanwhile, Wes checked their electronics for Friday's mission. The battered digital camera still functioned, and the old body cam seemed reliable enough for a short burst of filming, if they managed to stay hidden long enough at the mill to capture evidence of illegal dealings, money changing hands, or a direct link to the officials who'd orchestrated Garrett's downfall. Then they could broadcast the images online before the conspirators had time to react. Evening settled in. Dim lamplight flickered across the walls, exposing decades-old cobwebs and yellowing wallpaper. Outside, Garrett could make out the silhouettes of tall evergreens against a moonlit sky. The hush of the wilderness pressed in on them, both comforting and ominous. At one point, Jade volunteered to take a short walk around the property to ensure no one was spying. Garrett insisted on accompanying her, leaving Wes behind to keep an eye on the cabin and Axel. Armed with flashlights and sidearms, they circled the perimeter of the ramshackle cluster of cottages, stepping carefully on cracked concrete paths. Weeds poked through gaps, and broken windows on neighboring cabins seemed to stare like hollow eyes. They reached a small clearing near a rusted swing set, likely part of an old playground once used by vacationers' children. Jade paused, sweeping her flashlight beam across the warped metal. It's eerie how a place that used to bring people joy can become so forgotten. Garrett nodded, switching off his own flashlight. The moon was bright enough to see shapes against the grass. "A lot of things get forgotten," he said quietly, "especially in towns like Redwood Falls, where jobs dried up and people moved away. There's a sadness in it." She studied his expression, then gently lowered her voice. "I never asked how you feel about Friday. It's a big risk, going back into that mill. You've already escaped execution once." His jaw tightened. "It's not really a choice, is it? I can't live the rest of my life in hiding, labeled as a cop killer. If exposing these people and proving my innocence means staring down bullets, so be it." Jade's eyes flicked to the ground. "I know, I just want you to make it out of this." She hesitated, as though searching for the right words. "We've been through a lot in a short time. I consider you a friend, Garrett. You and Axel both." A warmth spread through his chest, cutting through the constant knot of tension. "That means more than you know," he said softly. "When I lost my career, my reputation, I started thinking maybe everyone was my enemy. But you're here, risking everything to clear my name. She managed a wry smile. Guess I inherited the stubborn streak from my father. He believed in truth at any cost. They stood in silence for a moment, the moon reflecting off Jade's hair. The hum of insects seemed to fill the void. Eventually, Garrett cleared his throat. We should head back. Wes might wonder. They returned to the cabin to find Wes adjusting a coil of wire on the table. Homemade motion sensors, he explained, gesturing to small battery-powered devices. Not perfect, but if anyone comes near the cabin while we sleep, these should make a racket. Jade set her flashlight down, nodding. That's something at least. They wound down the evening with hushed conversation, going over final details for Friday's stakeout. Axel lay contentedly by Garrett's feet, occasionally lifting his head at the mention of Friday, as if the dog understood it signaled a pivotal moment. Outside, the wind gusted, rattling loose shutters. No flash of headlights pierced the darkness. Still, Garrett found it impossible to fully relax. When morning came, the three of them roused early. Jade made a quiet supply run into Redwood Falls, groceries and fresh bandages, claiming she would pass as just another passing traveler. She took care to wear a hoodie that obscured her face. Garrett waited anxiously at the cabin until her return. The hour she spent gone felt like an eternity. But when she finally drove up in a beat-up sedan she'd borrowed from Wes's contact, Garrett exhaled in relief. All clear, Jade reported, popping the trunk to reveal a small haul of groceries. I saw no sign of watchers. The town looks pretty dead, honestly. They spent most of that day bracing themselves for the night to follow. Friday's confrontation would require them to enter the mill after dusk, hide in their chosen vantage spots, and capture undeniable footage of whatever illicit deal Nightchapel had orchestrated. If the high-ranking cops, politicians, or private security turned up with bribe money in hand, that would be the proof Garrett needed. Or so they hoped. At dusk, they loaded the SUV with their gear, tested the cameras one final time, and ensured the memory cards had space. Wes donned dark clothing, as did Jade and Garrett. Axel's bandage was replaced with a fresh strip of gauze, and the dog moved with renewed determination in every step. Time stretched oddly as the hours ticked by. They had settled on arriving late, around 9:30 p.m., giving themselves half an hour to get into position before the suspected 10 p.m. exchange. The drive back toward Redwood Falls was somber, headlights carving tunnels through the darkness. In the back seat, Axel rested his muzzle on Garrett's thigh. Neither Jade nor Wes spoke, the weight of the coming operation pressing down. They entered the outskirts of Redwood Falls under a moonless sky. Streetlights flickered on empty roads. Wes cut the engine lights just before turning onto a dirt track that skirted the main highway. From here, they'd approach the mill from behind, avoiding any watchers who might be parked near the main gate. The tension in the SUV was palpable. "Everyone knows their role," Jade whispered, her voice tight with anticipation. "Wes, you'll take the ridge vantage with the main camera. Garrett, you and Axel go inside near that mezzanine. I'll circle around to watch the main yard in case they try something outside." Garrett swallowed, heart pounding. "If it looks like we'll get caught, we bail. But let's keep communications open." They had a trio of cheap prepaid phones to stay connected. None of them trusted radio channels or anything that could be easily intercepted. As they parked under the trees behind a dilapidated shed, the last faint glow of distant street lamps vanished, leaving only starlight. Jade distributed small flashlights with red filters. Wes hefted a canvas bag containing the camera, phone, and a first aid kit. Garrett rubbed Axel's ears to calm his own nerves as much as the dog's. "All right," Wes said quietly. "No heroics. We document, then get out. Let's move." They split up. Wes took the path leading uphill, hunching low as he disappeared among pines. Jade and Garrett, with Axel at his side, slipped through the brush toward the fence's collapsed section. The night air carried a faint tang of rust and river water. Once again, Garrett found himself creeping over uneven ground near the mill, only now every sense was sharpened by the knowledge that within minutes, powerful men might arrive, men with guns and nothing to lose. He and Jade exchanged a final nod at the fence line. She veered left, heading for an exterior vantage behind some stacked pallets. Garrett beckoned Axel forward, stepping through the gap. The yard was a patchwork of moonlit shapes. Broken machinery loomed like ancient skeletons. He forced himself to move slowly, mindful of glass shards underfoot. Inside the main building, darkness pooled. Starlight slid through holes in the roof, illuminating beams of dust. Garrett flicked on the red filter flashlight for a moment, guiding Axel around debris. The dog's ears were pricked, body taut. Any whisper of sound could be the enemy. For a moment, Garrett recalled the days when he and Axel tracked suspects in abandoned warehouses, just like this. The dog always led, nose pinpointing danger. They found the metal staircase that led to the mezzanine. Each step groaned under Garrett's weight, but they continued upward. Reaching the top, he crouched, scanning for signs of movement. From this perch, he could see half the interior floor below. A few broken windows offered a view of the yard beyond. If the conspirators chose to enter the building, he'd have them on camera. He positioned the small digital recorder, balancing it atop a steel beam. To avoid the glare of a screen, he taped over the indicator light. Then he switched it on, ensuring the lens angled at the main entrance. Quietly, he patted Axel's flank to keep him settled. The dog peered over the edge, though there wasn't much to see besides a dimly lit patch of concrete and shadowy piles of junk. Seconds crawled by, stretching into silent minutes. Garrett's heartbeat thudded in his ears. A faint creak sounded from somewhere outside. Could that be Jade shifting position or something else? He clenched his jaw, fighting the urge to check his phone. Every motion risked revealing their hiding spot. Instead, he took a slow breath and forced himself to stay alert, scanning each shadow. Suddenly, headlights flickered through the windows, sweeping across the interior walls. Garrett froze. A vehicle was approaching from the front. The beams cut out, plunging them back into darkness. Moments later, he heard the scrape of tires on gravel, a dull thud as a door opened, then shut. Axel let out a low rumble, barely audible. Garrett stroked the dog's back, silently signaling him to remain calm. He peered through the broken window to see a shape emerging. Just one? No, two silhouettes moving cautiously across the yard. The distance made details impossible to discern. They stepped around debris, eventually stopping near a rusted metal drum. One figure pulled out a flashlight, pointing it at the ground. Garrett's pulse quickened. Were they early scouts or the main party? He willed his camera to capture the scene clearly enough, though the angle might be imperfect from here. He glimpsed the second figure lifting what looked like a cell phone, then pressing it to his ear. The faint murmur of conversation drifted in. He turned to Axel, whispering, "Be still." The dog shivered slightly, instincts ignited by tension. Garrett weighed the risk of checking in with Jade by phone. The slightest noise might echo in the cavernous space. For now, he stayed put, each second stretching taut as a wire. Another vehicle arrived. Garrett heard the rumble of an engine, the crunch of tires, then saw a set of headlights sweep in from a different angle. More shadows, this time 3 or 4. A quiet exchange of words, too low to decipher. Something metallic clanged, perhaps a trunk opening. It was happening, the clandestine gathering unfolding right before him. He inched forward on the mezzanine floor, angling for a better view. Axel followed, paused silent on the dusty metal. Below, a voice rose. "Check around. We can't have any surprises. Our client arrives soon." Garrett's stomach twisted. That meant more men would fan out, potentially heading inside. If they discovered him here, they'd shoot first and ask no questions. He swallowed, forcing his breathing steady. Axel glanced at him, nose quivering in the stale air. For a split second, Garrett's mind raced, trying to recall every inch of the structure, any escape route if cornered. But fear wouldn't help him now. They had come to gather evidence, and that meant staying put until the real power players showed themselves. Outside, a faint sound of footsteps approached the entrance. Tension coiled tighter. Garrett switched on the camera's audio recording feature to ensure the microphones picked up anything audible. The conspirators' words might be the final piece of the puzzle to exonerate him. Axel's low growl died in his throat when Garrett gently pressed a hand to the dog's muzzle. Together, they waited, hearts pounding, as dark shapes converged on the mill's threshold. This was it, the moment they'd staked everything on. If they could capture Nightchapel's leaders in the act, Garrett would finally have a chance to reclaim his life. But if they failed, the shadows below would consume them, just as they'd consumed so many others who dared defy the rot inside the system. Garrett held his breath as silhouettes flickered near the entrance. Every nerve in his body thrummed, anticipating the footsteps that would follow. Below, a half-collapsed doorway led from the yard into the mill's main chamber, and the new arrivals wasted no time stepping through. The beam of a high-powered flashlight stabbed across the cluttered floor, illuminating twisted metal beams and the sagging conveyor belt that once hauled pulp for processing. Axel tensed at Garrett's side, muscles coiled like a compressed spring. With a gentle hand on the dog's neck, Garrett silently urged him to stay. Any sudden movement now would echo in this cavernous space. The camera perched on the steel beam recorded steadily, though in the dimness, the image might be grainy. Audio, however, was crucial. If these men started talking openly about payoffs and conspiracies, it would seal their fate. A harsh whisper rose from below. "We're early, but that's good. We'll have time to sweep the place." More footsteps echoed, overlapping the first voice. Garrett detected at least 4 separate individuals in the immediate group. Through a broken strip of the mezzanine railing, he caught a glimpse of motion. A man wearing a baseball cap, another in a dark jacket, and 2 more behind them. The flashlights flickered across piles of debris. One beam swept upward, but not high enough to reach the mezzanine's vantage point. "This place is a dump," one figure muttered, voice low and gravelly. "They better not stand us up." "They won't," another answered. "Too much on the line." Garrett recognized that second voice instantly, Captain Eddings. His mind reeled with mingled rage and vindication. Eddings was indeed part of the conspiracy. The same man who testified that Garrett had gone rogue now stood here under cover of darkness, orchestrating something illicit. If the camera picked up his face, or at least his voice, it could be enough to trigger an investigation. He edged closer to the mezzanine's railing, ignoring the prick of rusted metal. Axel stirred, letting out the faintest huff. Garrett offered a reassuring pat, then risked a glance below. Eddings stood near a cluster of barrels, scanning the space with practiced alertness. A ring of men formed around him, maybe subordinates or hired security. Then from the yard came the sound of another vehicle rolling to a halt. A new set of headlights danced across the broken walls. The hush that followed was tense. Garrett knew Jade must be watching from her vantage outside. He prayed she had a safe spot to film. If a firefight erupted, she would be pinned down. A moment later, 2 more figures stepped inside. One was tall, dressed in a tailored overcoat that seemed out of place in these ruins. The other wore a wide-brimmed hat low over his forehead. Voices rose in greeting, and Eddings's tone shifted, taking on a subservient edge. "Councilman," Eddings said quietly, "glad you could make it." A chill coursed through Garrett. A councilman involved, possibly from the city's leadership or even the state. No wonder they had such reach. No wonder they manipulated the courts to send him to death row. Garrett's pulse hammered as he leaned forward, camera light blinking invisibly from the mezzanine. The councilman replied, "Time is short. Our buyer can't risk exposure. We complete the transfer tonight. Is the money ready?" "Yes," Eddings said. "All prearranged through the bank codes." Garrett gritted his teeth, thinking of the Phoenix Mesa Bank references in the hidden files. This was the smoking gun, the direct mention of a buyer, hush money, secret transfers. His heart soared with a fierce hope that the recording would catch every syllable. That hope sharpened into anxiety as more men fanned out, checking corners. Below, a thick-set man in a black windbreaker signaled to Eddings, "We should do a final sweep, boss. Last time we used a place like this, we had squatters." Eddings nodded. "Take 2 men, check every room and the upper catwalks." Garrett's blood went cold. They were heading upstairs. That meant the mezzanine. He crouched, gently guiding Axel behind a battered metal cabinet that partially shielded them from view. The dog's ears flattened as though sensing the immediate peril. He flicked a glance at the camera perched on the beam. If they had to bolt now, the recording might still remain, capturing the men's voices. But retrieving it later would be dangerous or impossible. Garrett steeled himself, swallowing a surge of fear. If those men reached the mezzanine, they'd find him pinned with nowhere to run. Footsteps began clanging on the metal stairs. 2 sets, heavy boots. Garrett hunched lower, pressing his back against the rusted cabinet. Axel remained utterly still, muzzle on Garrett's knee. The tension was excruciating. The beam of a flashlight cut across the upper walkway, throwing spidery shadows. One guard hissed, "Nothing over here." The other swung his light in slow arcs. "You think it's clear?" They advanced, boots scraping metal. The hush was thick. Garrett could smell stale grease and old dampness, punctuated by his own sweat. He stifled a cough, fear pounding in his chest. If the men walked past the old cabinet, they'd see him and the dog crouched behind it. No cover, no illusions. Time seemed to slow. The flashlights drew closer. Garrett felt Axel's heartbeat thrum through the dog's ribs. The 2 men paused. One shone the beam across a row of overhead pipes. "Just rotting junk. Let's head back." The second guard exhaled. "Fine, let's not waste time." Their steps retreated. Metal clanged as they descended the stairs again, leaving Garrett and Axel in trembling silence. Relief battered him like a wave. Carefully, he raised his head, glimpsing the guards returning to the group below. Down on the floor, Eddings was conferring with the councilman. Garrett strained to catch more details. A single sentence filtered up. "Our man in the mayor's office wants assurances this stays buried. He's still worried about that detective we framed." A sharper voice interjected, likely the councilman's. "He's gone. Executed or otherwise disposed of, it doesn't matter. We have no loose ends." Garrett clenched his fists, fury coiling within. They spoke of him like an afterthought, a nuisance they believed dead. The camera's lens blinked unseen, capturing every hateful syllable. He forced himself to remain motionless. He needed more. Something with absolute clarity tying them to the crime. Just then, a new rumble sounded from outside, a heavier engine. Jade's vantage in the yard would see it first, but soon the newcomers stepped in. At least 3 of them wearing matching jackets with a private security logo. One carried a heavy case. Eddings and the councilman exchanged curt nods, stepping forward to greet them. A round of hushed introductions ensued. Garrett's vantage was limited, but from the men's posture and a few clipped phrases, it became apparent that these were the buyers. They were checking the case for currency or contraband. He heard the metallic latches pop, then a low whistle. "That's half," Eddings said. "We get the other half once the goods arrive." "It's coming in on schedule," one of the private security men muttered. "We'll load it onto unmarked vans. We expect your department to clear the roads." The councilman nodded. "Done. Traffic cameras go offline at 2200. No patrols. You can move freely." Garrett's heart thundered. They were discussing a major smuggling operation, or perhaps something more sinister. Every word was precious evidence. He dared shift the camera's angle a fraction, hoping to capture it. With luck, Jade was also filming from her angle. The conspirators had, without realizing it, created the perfect confession scenario. Still, a question loomed. How could they extricate themselves without being spotted once the group dispersed? The men might remain on site for hours, or depart in a staggered manner, and if even one guard discovered the camera or realized Garrett was there, the risk was suffocating. Axel's ears pricked again. This time the dog stood as though anticipating a shift in the men's focus. A sudden spike in voices told Garrett something unexpected was happening. Below, the flashlight beams flared, pointed toward the entrance. "What do you mean we have company?" Edding snapped. "Is it the Byers people?" A guard's voice carried. "No, sir. Unfamiliar sedan, pulled up by the fence." Garrett's stomach lurched. Could that be Jade's Vantage compromised? Or maybe some random driver? He pressed closer to the mezzanine edge, mindful of keeping his head low. One of the conspirators hissed a command. "Go see who it is. Make them leave. If they resist, handle it quietly." In a flurry of movement, two men jogged toward the yard, rifles slung across their shoulders. Edding spun, addressing the councilman in tense whispers that Garrett couldn't fully catch. Something about not letting this sabotage the deal. A swirl of anxiety churned in Garrett's gut. If Jade had been discovered, she might be in mortal danger. She was alone out there. Wes was on the ridge, out of immediate reach, and Garrett was pinned in the building. Axel sensed his alarm, letting out a low, distressed whine. Garrett fought the impulse to bolt, to storm outside. He forced himself to reason. Jade was resourceful, with training and a weapon. She'd have retreated if she saw danger. Maybe the sedan was someone else entirely. If he rushed down now, he'd blow the entire operation. The best course was to remain hidden, gather the evidence, and wait for the right moment. Below, Eddings barked into a phone. "We can't afford complications. We'll finish the exchange fast, then clear out." The councilman, voice dripping with annoyance, said, "The location was your choice. We shouldn't have used a place so open." A private security man snapped the case shut. "No more delays. You've got half the payment. We'll finalize the rest next week. Same channel. Let's go." Men began moving, the hush filling with scuffed footsteps and the metallic clang of equipment. Garrett realized they were cutting it short, presumably spooked by the sedan's sudden appearance. If the conspirators left too soon, that might hamper the chance to capture more explicit admissions, but they had already recorded references to bribes, shipments, clearing roads, and lethal cover-ups. That might be enough to spark an unstoppable scandal. He watched as Eddings and the councilman retreated toward the exit, followed by the hired guns. Another beam of light washed across the interior. Garrett ducked, pulling Axel close. The footsteps receded. The interior fell quiet, broken only by the drip of water from somewhere above. A minute stretched into 2. Then Garrett heard engine roars outside as vehicles started up. Headlights cut across the windows. He waited, anxiety gnawing. Finally, the engines faded away into the night. Had Jade escaped notice? Were the men gone for good? He risked an inch closer to the window, peering out. Darkness veiled the yard now, no sign of the vehicles. The hush was almost unreal. He eased a slow breath. They had done it, recorded damning evidence of a secret conspiracy involving Eddings and a councilman. Provided Jade was safe, they might combine their footage and blow this wide open. But Garrett wasn't ready to declare victory yet. He carefully retrieved the camera. Axel sniffed the air as if still detecting faint traces of the conspirators' presence. Silently, Garrett motioned for the dog to follow him down the stairs. Every step rang with the awareness that at any moment some straggler could pop out and open fire. At the building's threshold, he paused, scanning the yard. Empty. A soft wind stirred the battered scraps of fence. He guided Axel through the darkness toward the fence gap, calling Jade's name in a low hiss. No answer. That sent alarm bells ringing in his mind. He tried his phone. No signal. The old mill's corrugated walls often interfered with reception. Hurrying forward, he reached the perimeter. Still no sign of Jade. But a shape loomed near the corner. A figure slumped on the ground. Heart hammering, Garrett rushed over, dread coiling in his gut. As he neared, the shape stirred, then whipped around. He froze, pistol drawn. Axel bristled. For a split second, he expected a confrontation, but then a voice hissed, "Don't shoot!" It was Jade. She lay crouched behind a stack of rotting pallets, breathing hard. Relief crashed over him. "Are you okay?" She nodded, lowering her own weapon. "Two of them spotted me. I had to hide fast. They gave up when they got a call, probably from Eddings, and left." Garrett exhaled, pressing a hand over his face. "They're gone now. Did you capture anything?" Jade offered a shaky smile. "Some. Mostly shadowy figures talking about finalizing payments. And I got the councilman's face on camera when he stepped into the headlights. It's not perfect, but it's something. We have the rest inside, including Eddings' voice." Garrett patted the camera in his pocket. "It's enough to blow this case open." Jade rose, wincing at a bruise on her arm. "Then we need to vanish before they realize we were here." Axel sniffed Jade's jacket, verifying her safety. She gave the dog an affectionate rub behind his ears. Together, they retreated from the yard, heading back toward the ridge path where Wes had stationed himself. Every shadow still felt dangerous, and the night sky offered little reassurance. Yet adrenaline and triumph surged within Garrett. After all this time, he had the proof. They found Wes near a scrawny pine, scanning the mill with binoculars. He jerked around when they approached, tension melting into relief. "I saw them leave in a hurry," he whispered. "Everything good on your end?" Jade nodded. "They nearly caught me, but I slipped away, and Garrett got footage inside." A grin tugged at Wes's lips. "Then let's get out of here." They turned as one, stepping into the deeper darkness of the forest. In the distance, the faint glow of Redwood Falls glimmered. Axel trotted between them, ears perked, as though he too sensed they'd scored a victory. But that victory was precarious. The conspirators might soon realize their secret meeting wasn't so secret. Danger would escalate. Still, as they navigated a narrow path back to the waiting SUV, Garrett felt a weight lifting from his chest. He was no longer running blind. The camera in his pocket held voices linking Eddings, the councilman, and who knew how many others to corruption, bribery, and attempted murder. If they played their cards right, tomorrow the world would know. For the first time since his life imploded, Garrett Rayner believed justice might be within reach, and with it, a new beginning for him and the loyal dog who never wavered at his side. They drove away from the abandoned mill under a moonless sky, keeping the headlights off until they were well past Redwood Falls. In the back seat, Garrett clutched the camera like a lifeline. Axel sat at his feet, calm but watchful. Jade hunched forward in the passenger seat, occasionally glancing at the rear window. Only Wes maintained his composure, guiding the SUV along back roads with practiced efficiency. The hush inside the vehicle thrummed with both victory and dread. "We have it," Garrett said quietly, staring at the small device in his hands. "Eddings, the councilman. References to the entire network. If that recording's clear, it should blow open the case." Jade glanced over her shoulder, offering a shaky grin. "But they mentioned finalizing the deal next week." If we wait too long to reveal this, they'll go underground or destroy evidence. We need to act fast. Tonight, if possible." Wes nodded, eyes fixed on the winding road. "Agreed. But we still have to worry about who we can trust. If we give this to the wrong person in law enforcement, they'll bury it." "An independent journalist, then," Jade suggested. "One with a big platform who can go live with the story and protect the footage from being suppressed." Garrett thought of an old contact, a local reporter named Tiana Roberts, once known for exposing corrupt city officials. She had tried to interview him right after his conviction, but the warden wouldn't allow it. "I know someone," he said. "Tiana, she's no sellout, but she'll need proof it's legit. If she sees that footage, she'll run it on her channel." "Then that's our best shot," Wes agreed. "Where is she based?" "2 counties east," Garrett replied. "A bigger town. If we leave now, we can be there by dawn. But we have to be careful not to lead trouble straight to her doorstep." Jade exhaled. "So we drive through the night and keep an eye on our tail. If we spot anything suspicious, we change course." They all concurred. Wes accelerated, merging onto a narrower highway that would eventually feed into a major route toward Tiana City. Hours stretched, and tension coiled in Garrett's shoulders. Once, he spotted headlights in the rearview mirror far behind, a pinprick of light that seemed to follow their every turn. Fear churned until the headlights turned off onto a different road. Perhaps it was only a random traveler. Yet the conspirators had the manpower to mount a relentless chase if they suspected a breach. Axel dozed intermittently, muzzle on Garrett's leg, occasionally lifting his head whenever the SUV hit a bump. Jade stayed vigilant up front, tapping instructions into a navigation app on her phone. The phone's battery drained quickly in the patchy coverage, forcing her to switch it off sporadically. Meanwhile, Garrett's own phone remained quiet. He dared not contact his lawyer yet. The lines might be monitored. By the time the first streaks of dawn stained the sky, they were nearing the outskirts of Fairview, a modest but bustling city. Office buildings and strip malls emerged from the gloom. Jade directed Wes into a half-full parking lot behind a 24-hour diner, hidden from the main road. They needed coffee, gas, and a plan to contact Tiana discreetly. Parking behind a battered van, they took a moment to breathe. Axel hopped out, circling to stretch. Jade rolled her shoulders, scanning the area for watchers. It was a cold morning, the air sharp with the smell of asphalt. The diner's neon sign blinked weakly. "Open 24 hours." "I'll go inside," Jade said, slipping on a cap. "Buy some to-go cups, see if anyone suspicious is around. Then I can call Tiana from a burner phone. Wait here until I give the signal." Wes handed her enough cash for coffee and breakfast snacks. "And see if you can grab a map. Relying on the phone's GPS might be risky if we need to vanish again." She nodded and strode away, posture deceptively casual. Garrett stood by the SUV, resting a hand on Axel's harness. The dog watched Jade's departure, ears half lowered in a content but alert posture. Garrett recognized a new rapport growing between them all. This crisis had forged alliances that felt more like family than strangers. Wes checked under the hood of the vehicle as if to confirm no trackers had been planted. After several minutes, Jade re-emerged from the diner carrying a cardboard tray of coffee cups. She flashed a quick nod and motioned them over. "Place seems normal," she said, passing out steaming cups. "I used the payphone inside to call Tiana. She wants us to meet at an abandoned printing warehouse on the southwest side. Says it's safe and quiet." Garrett sipped the hot coffee, letting the caffeine jolt his frayed nerves. "The old Newman Press building near the canal," Jade confirmed with a tight smile. "She didn't want us anywhere near her house or office. She's sure her lines are tapped. She'll bring a camera crew, just 1 or 2 trusted colleagues." "Good," Wes said. "Let's move." They piled back into the SUV. The morning sun now glared off glass storefronts, revealing a city slowly waking. Rush hour traffic might cloak their movement, but also risked confrontation if watchers tried to corner them on crowded streets. Wes navigated carefully, alternating between major roads and side streets, always scanning mirrors. Soon they approached a rundown industrial district where factories sat idle. They located the rusted sign, Newman Press, and turned down a potholed lane, the skeleton of the old warehouse looming ahead. The place seemed deserted except for a lone sedan parked near a side entrance. Jade tensed, checking her phone. Tiana said she'd arrive in a gray sedan with her cameraman, license plate matches. They pulled up cautiously. A slender woman in a trench coat stepped forward, accompanied by a younger man carrying a tripod. Garrett recognized Tiana Roberts from years ago, her hair now a bit shorter, but her expression every bit as determined. She lifted a hand in greeting. "Garrett Rayner?" He slid out of the SUV, heart pounding. Axel trotted after him, sniffing the air. "Tiana, thanks for meeting us." Her gaze swept over them, Jade, Wes, and the tired dog, lingering on the bandages that wrapped Garrett's wrist and Axel's leg. "Looks like you've had a rough time," she said gently. Then her voice sharpened. "I hope you have something big, because I'm sticking my neck out meeting you here." Jade led the way inside the warehouse. Dust motes danced in the slanted light from broken windows, half illuminating crates stacked in corners. The cameraman flicked on a portable lamp, revealing rusted printing presses and tangles of old conveyor belts. It smelled of mold and oil. Once they settled around a makeshift table made of 2 crates and a sheet of plywood, Garrett exhaled. Carefully, he removed the memory card from the camera and held it out. "This contains proof I was framed. High-ranking officers, city officials, a corrupt network funneling bribes, ordering hits. We also recorded them speaking about the murder charges pinned on me." Tiana's eyes widened. She gestured to her cameraman, who produced a laptop. "Let's see it," she said, voice tight with anticipation. They connected the card. The footage came up, grainy in the dark, but the audio crisp enough to hear Eddings, the councilman, and references to hush money, road closures, even the mention of burying a detective who was disposed of. Tiana's breath caught when she recognized Captain Eddings' voice bragging about half the payment on site. "This is..." She paused, blinking. "It's explosive. I can't believe they'd speak so openly about blackmail and shipments." Jade nodded grimly. They felt safe, hidden. They thought Garrett was long gone. The cameraman's eyes flicked from the laptop to Tiana. "Should we go live on your channel? Show the raw footage?" Tiana hesitated. "Yes, but we need context. I'll film a short interview with Garrett explaining how he was framed, referencing these files." She glanced at Jade and Wes. "We'll keep your names anonymous if you prefer." Jade exchanged a look with Wes. He shrugged. "My face is less important than Garrett's testimony. We can remain off camera as backup." Axel ambled forward, pressing close to Tiana's leg. She offered a tentative pat on his head, eyebrows quirking at the dog's bandage. "Your partner?" she asked softly. Garrett nodded, throat tight. "He saved my life more than once." Tiana gave a compassionate smile. Then she waved the cameraman over. "Let's do this quickly. Once we go live, it's only a matter of time before that network reacts." They positioned a single spotlight on Garrett amid the dusty crates. He sat on a cracked wooden stool, Axel at his feet. Tiana stood beside the camera, testing the microphone. "Okay," she said in a steady voice, "rolling in 3, 2, 1. A small red light blinked, and Tiana addressed the lens with her signature calm authority. "This is Tiana Roberts, investigative journalist. Today, I'm in an undisclosed location with a man who until recently was slated for execution after being convicted of murder. He claims he was framed by powerful figures in law enforcement and government." She motioned to Garrett. "Garrett Rayner, please share your story." Garrett inhaled, meeting the lens head-on. "My name is Garrett Rayner. I was once a detective. I uncovered evidence of a deep corruption ring, but was accused of murder before I could expose them. This is my partner Axel, a trained K-9. Together we gathered hidden records connecting high-level cops and politicians to an operation codenamed Nightchapel. We risked everything to obtain audio and video proof. Now, for the first time, the truth." He handed Tiana a small stack of printouts from the metal box, plus references to the flash drive. "We have copies stored off-site," he added. "If anything happens to us, these files will go public anyway." Tiana looked straight into the camera. "Viewers, you're about to see footage recorded last night in Redwood Falls, where Garrett Rayner, with help from allies, captured senior officials discussing bribes, trafficking, and falsified charges against an innocent man. We caution this is raw audio, but it may prove a wide-reaching conspiracy." The cameraman fed the file into a streaming program, and soon the hush of the warehouse filled with disembodied voices, Eddings, the councilman, and references to the bribe. The councilman's face appeared briefly in the grainy night vision lens. Tiana's live feed carried it all. She narrated quietly as the conspiracy unfurled. Talk of hush money, mention of the detective they framed, and fear of being discovered. Even from where Garrett stood, he could see the scorching truth. These words were impossible to dismiss. The camera shook slightly at points, but the conspirators' guilt was undeniable. Jade, watching from the sideline, exhaled, relief flickering across her features. Wes stood guard, scanning the warehouse doors. As the clip ended, Tiana turned back to Garrett. "What do you want from the public now, Mr. Rayner?" Garrett's voice shook with emotion. "I want my name cleared. I want those who orchestrated this to face the law. And I want everyone to see that if it can happen to me, a cop who believed in the system, it can happen to anyone. My only hope is that true justice still exists." Tiana wrapped up her broadcast, promising more details and urging viewers to share the story. The cameramen halted the feed, their faces flushed with adrenaline. "It's done," Tiana said softly, meeting Garrett's gaze. "Thousands of people have seen the footage already, maybe more if it goes viral." Jade stepped in, her eyes shining. "We did it. There's no going back now." Suddenly, Wes tensed, glancing toward the warehouse door. The rumble of engines, then tires screeching on pavement. Garrett's relief froze. Of course, the conspirators would track them, or maybe the broadcast had gone public too fast. Tiana's cameraman hurriedly closed his laptop, panic flashing in his eyes. Axel let out a sharp bark. Garrett scanned for cover behind the old presses. In the distance, heavy footsteps pounded across concrete. A voice boomed, "They're inside!" Wes cursed under his breath. "We have to move now. They'll shoot to kill." Tiana grabbed her gear, adrenaline surging. "I'll distract them. My cameraman and I will slip out the back. You three, go!" At the rear of the warehouse, Jade yanked open a rusted side door, clearing a path. Garrett motioned for Axel to follow, heart pounding. Even if they died tonight, the footage was already online. The conspirators couldn't bury the truth. Gunshots rang out, echoing through the old printing presses. Tiana and her cameraman dove behind crates, shouting that they were journalists. Jade, Wes, and Garrett managed to scramble out to the dark alley behind the building, guided only by flickering streetlights. Axel stayed close, ignoring the pain in his healing leg, propelled by devotion and adrenaline. They sprinted toward the SUV parked near a weed-choked lot. More shots rattled the air. A bullet pinged off a metal rail inches from Jade. She stumbled but kept running. Wes flung open the driver's door, hot-wiring the ignition with swift skill. In seconds, they roared away, the conspirators' shouts fading behind them. As the vehicle sped through deserted streets, Garrett cradled Axel's muzzle with both hands. "It's done," he whispered, trembling from the surge of fear and triumph. "No matter what happens next, the world knows. They can't execute me in secret anymore. Jade, panting beside him, let out a tight laugh. You're a free man in spirit, Garrett. Now let's make it official. Wes nodded, face set. We'll find somewhere safe to wait out the firestorm. But one thing's certain, they can't hide this anymore. You've broken their web of lies. A hush fell as they careened toward the city limits, adrenaline coursing through every vein. A faint sunrise began to glow behind the industrial skyline, a fitting symbol of new beginnings. Axel rested his head on Garrett's lap, eyes half closed, as if sensing that his role was finally fulfilled. And as they left Fairview behind, Garrett understood that though the fight wasn't over, a door had opened, one that led toward truth, redemption, and a life he'd thought lost forever. He pressed his hand against the dog's sturdy neck, gratitude stirring like a sunrise in his own heart. They had shattered the chains of injustice. Whatever lay ahead, he and Axel would face it together, free at last.